The first tear in Lady Cressida Vale's glove appeared 3 hours before London decided she was capable of ruining a duke. It was not a dramatic tear. Nothing in Cressida's life had been permitted the luxury of drama. It was a thin white split along the right forefinger, scarcely 2 inches long, just wide enough to show the pale skin beneath when she bent her hand. She noticed it while standing alone before the small looking-glass in the blue guest chamber of Alton House, with the sound of carriage wheels already gathering in the Mayfair street below. Regency London, 1816, had a talent for judging a woman by details. A faded ribbon could become a confession. A worn hem could become a character flaw. A repaired glove, if noticed by the wrong eyes, could become proof that Lady Cressida Vale had fallen further than anyone polite would say aloud. She lowered her hand, breathed once, and reached for the little work basket she kept hidden beneath folded shawls. The needle was threaded already. It usually was. Ladies who possessed allowances did not need to keep needles waiting. Ladies who lived on the kindness of relations learned to prepare for every quiet humiliation before it arrived. Cressida sat by the window, where the April light was clean enough to guide her stitches but not bright enough to flatter the tired silk of her gown. The gown had once been pearl grey. Years of careful brushing had softened it to the colour of mist over old stone. It was respectable, modest, and forgettable. The Marchioness of Alton approved of forgettable things when Cressida wore them. She took one small stitch, then another. Her hands were steady. That steadiness had cost her years. She had learned it after her father, the late Earl of Vale, died leaving debts, unanswered letters, and a marriage portion placed under the guardianship of relatives who spoke often of duty and very little of accounts. She had learned it when the Altons took her in with gracious smiles and gave her a chamber facing the back court, as though gratitude required a poor view. She had learned it when Lady Beatrice Alton began introducing her as "my dear cousin Cressida, who is so useful," with the same fondness one might offer a lapdog that never barked. Another stitch. Another breath. The glove held. For now. Behind her, the door opened without a knock. Cressida did not startle. Starting was a privilege for women whose privacy was respected. Still mending? Lady Beatrice Alton asked, her voice sweet enough to make cruelty sound like music. She came in wearing a gown of pale blue gauze, with little sprays of silver thread along the bodice. The colour made her eyes look clearer than they were. Beatrice was beautiful in the approved manner, all smooth brow, golden curls, and practised softness. She had never entered a room without knowing which face to wear. Tonight, she wore innocence. Only a loose seam, Cressida said. In speech, as in dress, she had learned to offer nothing that could be pulled apart. Beatrice drifted closer and looked at the glove. "Oh, Cressida. You don't mean to wear those tonight. They are clean." "Clean isn't the same as suitable." Beatrice smiled at the reflection of herself in the glass. "Mamma says His Grace is expected." Cressida's needle paused for less than a second. That was all. It was still too much. Beatrice saw it. Of course she saw it. The Duke of Westhaven, she added, as if Cressida might have confused His Grace with some lesser gentleman. "I heard. You met him once, didn't you? At Lady Honoria Pell's charity discussion. How clever that sounds." Beatrice took up Cressida's fan and opened it without asking. "Did he remember you afterward?" Cressida tied off the thread. "I would not presume to know." "No, you never presume. It must be restful." Beatrice snapped the fan shut. "Mamma says you are to stay near me tonight." "Not too near, naturally. Just near enough to be useful if I require another shawl or a glass of lemonade. His Grace dislikes grasping women, and Mamma thinks the contrast will serve me well." There it was. The lesson of the evening. Cressida was not to shine. She was to shade Beatrice's brightness by standing beside it in diminished light. "Then I shall endeavour to be a most effective contrast," Cressida said. Beatrice tilted her head. For a moment, something sharp moved behind the blue of her eyes. Then the sweetness returned. "That's why we keep you, dear. You always know your place." She left the room with a whisper of silken satisfaction. Cressida remained seated until the sound of Beatrice's steps faded. Only then did she lift the repaired glove and slide it over her hand. The mended line was nearly invisible. Nearly. She flexed her fingers. The silk tugged, but did not part. A foolish relief touched her. It lasted only until the housekeeper's second maid appeared at the door, cheeks pink from haste. "Her ladyship asks for you below, my lady." "Thank you, Mary." The girl glanced at the glove, then quickly away. Her expression softened with the sympathy servants were too wise to speak. Cressida stood. "Your cap ribbon is loose." Mary reached up at once, embarrassed. "Is it?" "Here." Cressida crossed the room and retied the ribbon neatly beneath the girl's chin. It was a small thing. Small things mattered in houses where great ones were denied. "There. No one will notice." Mary's eyes warmed. "Thank you, my lady." Cressida smiled, then followed her down the stairs. Alton House had dressed itself for conquest. The drawing rooms glowed with candlelight. The mirrors had been polished until they doubled every chandelier. Footmen moved with silver trays. The air smelled of beeswax, hothouse flowers, and the faint anxiety of families who had invited more consequence than comfort. Guests would arrive within the hour for the private assembly, though private meant only that the scandal, if one occurred, would be witnessed by people important enough to spread it efficiently. At the foot of the staircase, the Marchioness of Alton stood beside a marble-topped console, reading a folded letter. She was a handsome woman of severe elegance, with dark hair arranged in perfect bands and a mouth that had forgotten softness by choice. Her diamonds were old. Her temper was older. When she saw Cressida, she folded the letter at once, but not before Cressida caught the signature at the bottom. Mr. Silas Venn. The name meant nothing and yet caused the Marchioness to press the paper too tightly between her fingers. "Cressida," she said. "Come here." Cressida obeyed. The Marchioness looked her over from throat to hem. Her gaze paused at the gloves. Cressida felt the repaired seam as if it had become a wound. "Those will do," her ladyship said at last, which meant they would not do at all, but replacing them would cost money she did not intend to spend. "You will remain attentive to Beatrice tonight." "Yes, aunt." "You will not engage his grace in conversation unless he addresses you first." "Of course." "And if he does address you, you will be brief." The Marchioness slipped the folded letter beneath a silver salver, not hidden from servants, but hidden from family. That was an interesting distinction. A duke is not a gentleman to be entertained by every young woman who has once read a pamphlet at a charity meeting. Cressida kept her face still. "I understand." "Do you?" The Marchioness stepped closer. Her perfume was rosewater and iron discipline. "Your father's name gives you courtesy, Cressida, not consequence. You are Lady Cressida Vale because society is fond of old forms, but old forms do not pay modistes, settle accounts, or secure futures. Your position here is comfortable only while you remember that comfort is not owed. I have never forgotten it. See that you do not begin tonight." Behind them, Beatrice laughed with two arriving cousins near the archway, bright and effortless. The sound made the Marchioness turn, and pride softened her face for one brief instant. Then her eyes returned to Cressida. His Grace must see Beatrice without distraction. Cressida looked past her aunt toward the long drawing room, where candles trembled in their crystal branches and the first footman moved to open the front doors. "I am not a distraction. Any unmarried woman may become one if she stands in the wrong place." The words were quiet, almost kind. That made them worse. A knock sounded at the entrance. The first guests had arrived. The house shifted into performance. Cressida stepped back, taking her proper place near a side table where folded programs and spare gloves had been arranged for guests who might lose or damage their own. Spare gloves for guests, she thought, and almost smiled. The repaired seam along her finger tightened. Across the hall, the Marchioness glanced once toward the silver salver where Mr. Venn's letter waited beneath polite metal. Cressida saw the glance. She also saw Beatrice watch it. Something passed between mother and daughter, quick as a candle flicker and twice as dangerous. Then the butler announced the first names, and the evening began to fill with satin, rank, perfume, and expectation. Cressida lowered her hand so the mended glove would not catch the light. She had been instructed to be useful, quiet, and forgettable. She had been trained for years to survive in the margins of rooms like this. But as another carriage stopped before Alton House and a murmur moved through the servants near the door, she felt the air alter. Not grow louder. Grow still. Somewhere beyond the threshold, His Grace Lucian Harbury, Duke of Westhaven, had arrived. And Lady Cressida Vale, who had spent years perfecting the art of being unseen, suddenly feared that tonight someone had arranged for her to be noticed for all the wrong reasons. The stillness that entered Alton House before the Duke of Westhaven did was more telling than any announcement. Conversations thinned. Fans paused halfway through their fluttering. Mothers adjusted daughters by inches, as though a better angle of candlelight might become a marriage settlement. Lady Cressida Vale stood near the side table with the folded programmes and spare gloves, exactly where the Marchioness of Alton had placed her, and watched London rearrange itself around one man's arrival. His Grace Lucian Harbury did not hurry through the doorway. Dukes rarely needed to hurry. He was tall, dark-haired, and dressed in black evening clothes so precisely cut that even the candlelight seemed to behave around him. His expression was not cruel. That would have been easier to dislike. It was controlled, almost unreadable, the face of a man who had long ago learned to measure a room before allowing the room to measure him. The butler announced him, and every syllable of his title fell like a coin into a silver dish. Beatrice moved first. She did not rush. She drifted, blue silk shining, chin lowered just enough to suggest modesty without surrendering beauty. The Marchioness watched with the fixed calm of a general observing a planned advance. Cressida lowered her gaze to her gloved hands. The repaired seam held. For one useless second, she remembered the charity discussion at Lady Honoria Pell's house, when she had made an observation about widows' relief funds and the Duke had turned his head, not with indulgence, but with attention. It had lasted perhaps 20 seconds. She had been foolish enough to keep it. Lady Beatrice, the Duke said somewhere ahead of her? His voice was deep, low, and very even. Your Grace, Beatrice replied. We're honoured. Your mother is generous with her invitations. Mamma says London needs gentler rooms this season. Does she? There was no mockery in the question, but Cressida heard intelligence beneath it. Beatrice heard opportunity. She laughed softly. You make that sound unlikely. I find gentleness is often advertised most loudly by those who possess it least. The words were polite. They reached Cressida anyway. She should not have looked up. She did. Across the room, past pale shoulders and plumes and candle flames, Lucian Harbury's gaze found hers for the briefest instant. Not a stare. Not recognition enough to endanger her. Only a pause. Cressida felt it like a hand laid against a closed door. Then Beatrice shifted, and the line of sight was gone. The evening gathered pace. A violin began. Guests moved from one room to another, creating that false sense of ease at which the English aristocracy excelled. Cressida handed a programme to an elderly baroness, fetched lemonade for Beatrice, and stepped aside whenever a gentleman's glance drifted too near. She was performing invisibility well. Too well, perhaps, because no one noticed when Beatrice touched her wrist near the archway and whispered, Mamma wants the white shawl from the small salon. The one with the fringe. Don't be slow. Your maid can fetch it. Beatrice's smile did not change. My maid is attending Mamma. You are standing idle. Cressida glanced toward the Marchioness. Her aunt was speaking with the Duke beside a gilt-pier table, smiling in that smooth way she reserved for people too powerful to offend. Cressida should have refused. She knew it an instant before obedience carried her out of the room. That was the trouble with habits made from dependency. They moved the body before dignity could object. The small salon stood beyond a narrow corridor, half lit, the door open. Cressida found the shawl on a chair near the hearth. It was not white. It was ivory, and not Beatrice's favourite. That detail came too late. As she lifted it, a folded paper slid from between the fringes and landed near her shoe. She stared at it. Her name was written across the outside in a hand that looked enough like her own to chill her more than if it had been wholly strange. Lady Cressida Vale. She did not pick it up at once. There you are, a male voice said behind her. Cressida turned. A gentleman she barely knew stood in the doorway, blocking the light from the corridor. Mr. Ambrose Lyle, if memory served. A handsome, weak-chinned friend of men who laughed too loudly at cards and whispered too freely after wine. I was asked to bring this to you, he said. That is not mine. He looked down at the folded paper with theatrical surprise. Isn't it? No, your name seems to disagree. Footsteps approached. Not many. Enough. Beatrice appeared first, one hand at her throat. Behind her came two ladies, then a young viscount, then the Marchioness, whose face altered with such perfect timing that Cressida knew the shock had been rehearsed. What is this? The Marchioness asked. Mr. Lisle bent and lifted the paper before Cressida could stop him. A letter, my lady. I fear I found Lady Cressida alone with it. You found nothing, Cressida said. Her voice was calm. It had to be. I came for Lady Beatrice's shawl. Beatrice looked wounded. My shawl? Cressida, I didn't send you for any shawl. A small sound moved through the doorway. The beginning of gossip was never loud. It was a breath shared by people who sensed they might soon be entertained by another person's ruin. The Marchioness took the paper from Mr. Lisle. I should not read private correspondence. She opened it at once. Her eyes moved over the page. Her mouth tightened. Good heaven. Mamma. Beatrice whispered. It is addressed to His Grace. The corridor behind them filled further. Someone had fetched curiosity from the main drawing-room, and curiosity always arrived quickly in silk. Cressida saw Lucian Harbury approach through the gathering bodies. He did not push. The crowd made way because rank was its own form of command. What has happened? He asked. The Marchioness lowered the letter as if it burned. Your Grace, I am mortified beyond expression. That was untrue. She expressed mortification beautifully. This appears to be a letter from my niece to you. It is not, Cressida said. Lucian's gaze came to her. The pause was brief, but she felt the room lean into it. You have read it, he asked the Marchioness. Enough to understand its nature. It implies an attachment. A secret understanding. Perhaps even an intention to create one. Beatrice pressed closer to her mother. Cressida, how could you? I did not write it. Then why were you alone with it? Beatrice asked. Because you sent me here. I didn't. The denial was soft. Devastatingly soft. Soft enough that every person present wanted to believe it. Cressida looked from Beatrice to the Marchioness, then to Mr. Lisle. The pattern appeared fully now, cruel in its neatness. The shawl. The planted letter. The witness. The timing. The room. Her hand tightened around the ivory shawl, and the repaired seam of her glove pulled against her finger. Your Grace, said Mr. Lisle, stepping into importance with visible pleasure, I do not wish to speak improperly, but if a lady attempts to draw a gentleman of your station into a compromising correspondence, surely her conduct deserves answer. Some men would call it an insult worth challenging. Lucian's face hardened. Do not be absurd. Absurd? Mr. Lisle colored. A lady's reputation is at stake. Then you should have guarded your tongue before making a stage of it. The rebuke struck him silent. For one breath, Cressida thought justice might yet enter the room. Then the Marchioness extended the letter. Lucian took it. He read only a few lines. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Cressida could not see the words, but she saw his conclusion forming. He saw her name. He saw the crowded corridor. He saw the trap, perhaps, but not the direction of its teeth. I did not write it, she said again, lower this time. I was sent here. By whom? He asked. Beatrice inhaled as if wounded by the implication. The Marchioness placed one protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Cressida understood. If she answered, the room would hear a poor relation accuse the beautiful daughter of the house that sheltered her. Truth did not stand alone in rooms like this. It required rank, witnesses, and permission. She had none. Mr. Lisle, emboldened by silence, gave a short laugh. Your Grace, are you truly going to let her make a quarrel of this? Lucian looked at him with cold distaste. There will be no quarrel. But Lady Cressida's honor is not yours to parade. Then you will defend her. The question landed before everyone. It was not about defense. It was about spectacle. It invited the Duke to make Cressida either his cause or his contempt. Lucian looked once at the letter, then at Cressida, then at the hungry faces around them. When he spoke, his tone was controlled, clipped, and fatal. She isn't worth fighting for. Silence dropped so quickly that Cressida heard the candle nearest her spit. The Duke's eyes changed almost at once, as if he had heard his own words only after they had struck. Perhaps he had meant the scandal. Perhaps he had meant the quarrel. Perhaps in some colder, cleaner part of his mind, he had meant that no woman should be made the prize of male outrage in a corridor. It did not matter. The room had received its sentence. So had she. Beatrice's lashes lowered to hide triumph. The Marchioness exhaled as though saddened by necessity. Mr. Lyle looked satisfied. Cressida felt something inside her step backward from all of them, beyond reach. She did not tremble. She would not give them that. She folded the shawl once and placed it on the nearest chair. Then she looked at the Duke of Westhaven, not pleading, not accusing, only removing him from that small private shelf in her heart where 20 seconds of attention had foolishly remained. Then your Grace need not trouble himself to notice me again. A murmur passed through the corridor. Cressida turned before anyone could answer. She walked past Beatrice, past the Marchioness, past the faces bright with pity disguised as refinement. The air in the corridor felt too thin, the candlelight too hot. She reached the darker passage near the conservatory before Beatrice's reflection appeared in the glass beside a bank of hothouse leaves. "Cressida," Beatrice called softly. "Don't be dramatic. You'll only make it worse." Cressida did not turn. A hand caught her gloved wrist. Not hard enough to bruise. Hard enough to stop her. "Let me go." "Not until you understand what silence will cost you." The silk at Cressida's finger pulled sharply against the brass latch of the conservatory door. A small, terrible sound cut the dark. Fabric tearing. Then Cressida drew her hand free and moved deeper into the shadowed passage, leaving behind one white fragment court where no one was meant to look. Lucian Harbury did not remain in the corridor long enough to watch the room decide what his sentence had meant. He had seen that look before, the swift brightening of faces when society received permission to condemn someone without admitting it enjoyed the act. It had disgusted him in others for years. It disgusted him more now because he had given them the permission. Behind him, the Marchioness of Alton was already murmuring something about distress and unfortunate delicacy. Mr. Ambrose Lyle had recovered his colour and was speaking too loudly, as weak men often did when they mistook noise for courage. Beatrice stood with lowered lashes, the picture of wounded innocence. Lady Cressida Vale was gone. That absence altered the corridor more than her presence had. A moment earlier she had stood there with a folded shawl in her hands, surrounded by people willing to turn her poverty into evidence. Now there was only the empty place she had left behind and the echo of her last words. "Then your Grace need not trouble himself to notice me again." Lucian turned away before anyone could ask him another question. He did not owe Mr. Lyle an explanation. He did not owe the Marchioness a performance. Yet as he passed the open door of the small salon, he saw the ivory shawl lying on a chair with unnatural neatness. Too neat. Placed, not dropped. Cressida had been accused, humiliated, and dismissed, but she had still folded the shawl before leaving. The detail struck him with more force than tears would have done. A woman pretending injury might have clutched at drama. A woman trying not to break would put things in order because order was the last dignity available to her. He looked back toward the main rooms. The guests were beginning to move again. Candlelight trembled across silk and jewels. Conversation would soon return, softer and more poisonous than before. "Your Grace?" Beatrice's voice came from behind him. Lucian turned. She approached alone, though not carelessly. Women like Lady Beatrice understood the value of being almost private but still visible if discovered. "I hope you won't think too harshly of my cousin," she said. "Cressida has always had such a sensitive nature." "Has she?" "It's one of the reasons Mamma worries. Gratitude can become confusion in a dependent situation." Her eyes shone with sympathy, arranged for his benefit. When a woman has so little of her own, she can mistake kindness for invitation. Lucian studied her. And what kindness did I show Lady Cressida? Beatrice's smile faltered by the width of a breath. At Lady Honoria's discussion, perhaps. She spoke of it afterward. Did she? Only once or twice. Beatrice lowered her eyes. I shouldn't have mentioned it. Cressida would hate to seem foolish. The trap in that sentence was delicate. If he accepted it, Cressida became a foolish woman nursing a fantasy. If he rejected it, Beatrice could claim she had only meant to be kind. Lucian's impatience cooled into something harder. You said she had not been sent for the shawl. Because she hadn't. Then how did she know which shawl to retrieve? I don't know. Perhaps she guessed. Perhaps she meant to create a reason to be alone. With a letter she claims not to have written. I only know what we all saw. No, Lucian said. You know what you wished us to see. Beatrice went still. For the first time, the innocence thinned. Only slightly. Enough. Before she could answer, a sound came from the darker passage beyond the conservatory door. It was not a cry. It was smaller than that, a muffled breath, followed by the faint scrape of slipper against stone. Lucian looked past Beatrice. The passage was narrow, used by servants and by guests wishing to reach the glasshouse without crossing the drawing rooms. A bank of hothouse leaves pressed against the panes beyond, black and green under the weak lamps. Excuse me, he said. Beatrice moved as if to step in his way. Your Grace, the conservatory is poorly lit. You might prefer, I did not ask what I preferred. The word stopped her. Lucian walked past. He had taken no more than 6 paces when he saw it. A white fragment of silk clung to the brass latch of the conservatory door. At first it looked like a torn ribbon. Then the shape resolved under the light. A finger of a glove. Narrow. Fine. Mended along one edge with stitches so careful they were almost invisible. Lucian stopped as though the floor had shifted under him. He reached for it slowly, not because the object was fragile, but because something in him already understood that haste would be indecent. The silk came free with a faint whisper. It was warm from the pressure of the latch. Along the torn seam lay a small smear of blood, no larger than a grain of barley. Near the cuff edge, half hidden by the fold, clung a fleck of dark red wax. He brought it closer to the lamp. The wax matched the seal of the letter he had read minutes earlier. Not merely similar. Matched. There was more. A thread caught in the torn silk, bright even in the low light. Blue-green. Fine. Metallic. Not from Cressida's gown. Not from the ivory shawl. Lucian remembered Beatrice standing in the corridor with one hand at her throat, a bracelet glinting beneath her glove. Pale stones. Blue-green silk setting. His fingers closed around the torn piece of glove. For the first time in many years, anger rose in him without permission. Not the hot anger that demanded display. A colder thing. A reckoning. Your Grace? A maid stood at the bend of the passage, half in shadow, her cap ribbon slightly uneven despite an attempt to tie them neatly. She was young, and fear had drained the color from her face. Lucian recognized her from the staircase when he had arrived. She had been carrying folded napkins then. Now her hands were empty and trembling. Come here, he said, then softened his voice when she flinched. No one will harm you for answering me. She approached only a step. I shouldn't be here, sir. What is your name? Mary, Your Grace. Mary, did you see Lady Cressida come this way? Her eyes darted past him toward the brighter corridor. I didn't see everything. I did not ask for everything. I asked what you saw. Mary swallowed. Lady Cressida came from the small salon. She looked pale, but she was walking proper. Then Lady Beatrice followed her? Did Lady Beatrice speak to her? I heard her say not to be dramatic. Lucian's hand tightened around the torn silk. And after that? I heard Lady Cressida say, "Let me go." The word struck him cleanly, without ornament. Let me go. The phrase contained no scheme, no flirtation, no calculated ruin. Only refusal. Did you see Lady Beatrice touch her? Mary's voice dropped. She had hold of her wrist, sir. Not for long. Then the glove caught on the latch, and Lady Cressida pulled away. The silk tore. Lucian glanced toward the door. Where did Lady Cressida go? Toward the garden passage, Your Grace. The side door was open. I think she wanted air. Did anyone follow her? Mary hesitated. Lady Beatrice turned back when she saw me. She told me if I spoke, I would be dismissed without character. Fear entered the last words. For a servant, dismissal without character was not merely punishment. It was ruin in a plain dress. Lucian understood that at once. You will not be dismissed. Mary looked at him with desperate disbelief. That's not for me to say, sir. No. It is for me to say now. He removed a small card from his coat and held it out. Take this to my footman at the front entrance. Tell him His Grace requires Mr. Harcourt at once and that no carriage belonging to the Alton household is to be called until I give leave. No fuss. No announcement. Do you understand? Yes, Your Grace. Then send a message to Lady Honoria Pell if she is still in the house. Ask her to come to the small salon immediately. Use my name. Mary stared at the card as if it were a shield she did not quite trust. But if her ladyship asks why? Say that the Duke of Westhaven has misplaced his judgment and requires a witness before he misplaces anything else. For one startled second, the girl nearly smiled. Then she curtsied and hurried away. Lucian stood alone with the torn glove in his hand. Beyond the glass, the hothouse plants breathed damp heat into the darkness. Behind him, music resumed in the drawing room, polite and bright, as though nothing irreversible had occurred. He looked again at the wax. The green thread. The blood. Evidence, yes. But evidence of what? Not merely a planted letter. Not merely a jealous cousin. Something had been arranged with too much precision, and precision always had a purpose beyond embarrassment. Beatrice had needed Cressida accused. The Marchioness had needed the Duke to witness it. Mr. Lisle had needed to provoke a public answer. Lucian had given them one. The shame of that moved through him with a force he did not allow to show. He remembered Cressida's face when he had spoken. Not shattered. Worse. Quietly unsurprised, as if she had known all along that the world would choose the prettier lie if it came wrapped in rank. What have I done? He whispered. No one answered. That was fitting. A man who pronounced sentence before understanding the case deserved silence. Lucian slipped the torn glove inside his coat, close enough that he could feel the slight shape of it against his chest. Then he moved down the dark passage toward the garden door. The side entrance stood ajar. Cold night air entered through the narrow opening, carrying the scent of damp stone and clipped boxwood. Outside, the garden lamps burned low, spaced 10 feet apart along the path, each one leaving more shadow than light. At first he saw no one. Then, near the narrow turn where the passage met the kitchen garden wall, a pale figure stood half concealed by ivy and brick. Cressida! She had not fled far. She stood with her shoulders straight and her head slightly bowed, as if she had come there not to collapse but to negotiate privately with pain. One hand was bare. She had hidden it behind the folds of her skirt. Lucian stopped several feet away. He had entered rooms, courts, and hostile debates without uncertainty. Now he found he did not know how to take another step toward a woman he had just failed before witnesses. She heard him. Her spine stiffened. Please, she said without turning. If you have come to finish the room's judgment, do it from there. The restraint in her voice was more devastating than weeping. Lucian looked at the dark line of her uncovered wrist, at the hand she was trying to conceal, and felt the torn glove burn like a verdict inside his coat. No, he said quietly. I have come because I found what the room did not trouble itself to see. Cressida did not turn toward him at once. The garden wall held the night's dampness behind her, and the low lamps along the path made her pale gown appear almost grey, like a figure cut from the same mist that softened the London sky above the rooftops. She stood 6 yards from him, close enough for Lucian to see the line of her shoulders, far enough for propriety to remain between them like a third person. That distance mattered. Everything mattered now. A careless step, a raised voice, a hand offered too soon. He had already learned what damage one sentence could do when spoken before hungry witnesses. "What did you find?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but he heard the effort beneath it. Lucian took the torn fragment from inside his coat. He did not move closer. He only held it where the lamp could touch the white silk. Cressida looked at it. For the first time since he had followed her into the garden passage, her composure altered. Not much. Her chin lifted by a fraction, and the bare hand hidden in her skirt tightened. "I wondered where it had gone," she said. "It was caught on the conservatory latch. Then it has better instincts than most people in that house. It remained where it could be useful." The words were dry, almost calm. That made the faint tremor at the end of them more painful. Lucian lowered the silk. "There is blood on it. A scratch. Let me send for someone to look at it." No, her answer came too quickly. She seemed to hear the fear in it and corrected herself. "No, thank you. I do not require an audience for my finger." "You will not have one. Your Grace, forgive me if I don't trust the management of audiences tonight." He accepted the rebuke because it was deserved. "You are right." That made her look at him fully. In the darkness, her eyes seemed darker than they had in the corridor. Not softer. Never that. "I was not asking to be right." No, he drew a slow breath. "You were asking not to be judged before anyone had troubled to listen." Silence followed. From inside Alton House came a spill of music, bright and distant, as though the rooms behind them belonged to another world entirely. Cressida glanced toward the sound, then away. "They will be wondering where I went. Some of them are wondering how best to make your absence serve their story. Then I should not keep them waiting." She took one step toward the side door. Lucian did not block her. He had no right to block her. "Lady Cressida." She stopped. "If you return now, they will turn your composure into confession. If you cry, they will call it guilt. If you speak, they will call it desperation. If you remain silent, they will call it proof. You describe society with admirable accuracy. I do not admire it. You use it well enough." The word struck cleanly. He looked down at the torn glove in his hand. "I did tonight." A brief motion passed across her face. Not triumph. Not forgiveness. Recognition, perhaps, that he was not going to defend himself. "Why did you say it?" she asked. The question was quiet. It deserved more than the answer he wished he had. "Because Mr. Lyle was turning you into a cause for male display. Because the room wanted a quarrel, and I refused to provide one. Because I saw a trap and mistook its shape." He raised his eyes to hers. "But what I meant does not undo what I said." Cressida looked away. "No. It doesn't." She drew her bare hand from the folds of her skirt. A thin red line crossed the side of her finger where the silk had torn against the latch. There was no drama in it. That almost undid him. A small injury, a small piece of evidence, a small woman in the eyes of a room too grand to notice the cost of its entertainment. Lucian removed his evening cloak and held it open by the collar, still keeping the distance. "The air is cold. I am not fragile. I did not say you were. Everyone says it differently." Her gaze moved from the cloak to his face. "Poor Cressida. Sensitive Cressida. Useful Cressida. Grateful Cressida. It is remarkable how many names a woman may be given when no one wishes to use the true one. And what is the true one? Tonight." Her mouth curved without humor. "Inconvenient." Lucian did not smile. "Then allow me to be inconvenient as well. Lady Honoria Pell has been sent for. My footman is at the front entrance. No carriage belonging to the Altons will be called without my knowledge." Her eyes sharpened. "You had no authority to do that." "I had enough influence to request it quietly." "Influence is only authority with better manners." "Yes." The honesty checked her. "I will not pretend otherwise." He offered the cloak again, not toward her body, only into the space between them. "You may take this or refuse it. You may return to the house or not. You may speak to Lady Honoria or send me away. But I will not leave you alone in a passage while others are arranging your ruin. She stared at the cloak for another moment. Then she stepped forward and took it herself. He released it at once. She placed it around her shoulders with one hand, awkwardly because of the scratch, but she did not ask for help. He did not offer it. That restraint, he saw, was the first decent thing he had done for her all evening. Lady Beatrice followed me, Cressida said at last. After I left the corridor. Lucian became very still. I know Mary saw part of it. Mary will be punished if the Marchioness suspects she spoke. She will be protected. Servants hear promises from powerful people all the time. They learn which ones survive breakfast. Mine will. Cressida studied him as though searching for the pride beneath the sentence. You are very certain of yourself. Often. Tonight, I was wrong. That answer seemed to cost her some of her anger, and she did not appear grateful for the loss. Beatrice told me not to make it worse. I said nothing. She caught my wrist when I tried to pass. Not enough to leave a mark anyone would credit. Enough to remind me that she could. She said if I spoke of the letter or of Mr. Venn, she would make certain everyone knew I had invented an attachment to you. Mr. Venn, Lucian repeated. You know him? No. I heard his name before the assembly. The Marchioness received a letter from him. Later, when I went upstairs for my gloves, I passed the small morning room. The door was not fully closed. Beatrice was inside with her mother. I heard only a few words. Debt. A letter. Your Grace. Then Beatrice said my name. Her voice thinned, but did not break. I should have understood sooner. No. You should not have had to suspect your own family of staging your disgrace. They are not my family. Not in any way that matters. A door opened behind them. Lucian turned at once, placing himself slightly to the side, not before Cressida as if she were an object to conceal, but near enough that any newcomer would see she was not abandoned. Lady Honoria Pell stood at the threshold with Mary behind her. Lady Honoria was a small, erect woman in deep violet silk, with silver hair and eyes too clear for social nonsense. She looked first at Cressida, then at the cloak around her shoulders, then at Lucian. Westhaven, she said, when a duke sends word that he has misplaced his judgment, I find it wise to come quickly. I am grateful. I shall decide whether you should be. She stepped into the garden passage and held out both hands to Cressida without touching her. My dear child, do you wish to return to the room, or do you wish to leave this house? Cressida's lips parted. For several seconds, no answer came. Lucian realized then how rare the question must be for her. Not what must be done. Not what would look well. Not what gratitude required. What do you wish? Cressida looked toward the lit windows of Alton House. Behind them moved the silhouettes of people who had just watched her name become entertainment. Then she looked at Mary, who stood pale and frightened near the door. Mary must not suffer for what she saw, Cressida said. Lady Honoria's expression softened. That will be addressed. And my aunt will say I am unwell. I have been called worse by better women than your aunt. A faint breath escaped Cressida. It was not laughter, but it was close enough to life that Lucian felt it like mercy. She turned to him. If I leave, they will say I fled because I was guilty. If you stay, they will say you remained to scheme. Then there is no winning. Not tonight, he said. But there may be truth tomorrow. Cressida looked at him for a long moment. Truth tomorrow is a luxury usually owned by those who survive tonight. Then choose how to survive it. Lady Honoria nodded once, approving that he had finally learned to say the right thing by saying very little. Cressida drew the cloak closer around her shoulders. I will go with Lady Honoria. Lucian bowed his head. Then my carriage is at your disposal. No, the answer was immediate. Not yours. He understood before she explained. If she left in his carriage, Beatrice's next rumor would be written before dawn. Lady Honoria's carriage, then, he said. With Mary beside the coachman until she is safely away from Alton servants. My footman will follow at a distance. Lady Honoria gave him a sharp look. Acceptable. Cressida's bare hand tightened once around the torn edge of his cloak. She seemed suddenly aware of it and loosened her grip. "Your Grace." "Yes?" Do not mistake this for trust. The words should have stung. Instead, they steadied him. "I will not. And do not think a private kindness repairs a public cruelty." "I know it does not." Her eyes held his. "Good." Lady Honoria placed herself beside Cressida, giving the world the shape it required, an older lady escorting a younger one, propriety restored by presence and rank. Mary hurried ahead to arrange the carriage. Lucian remained where he was for a moment, watching Cressida walk back through the garden passage without lowering her head. The cloak covered her shoulders, but not her dignity. Nothing had covered that. At the side door, she paused only once, not to look at him, but toward the conservatory latch where the glove had torn. Lucian touched the fragment inside his coat. The small piece of silk no longer felt like evidence alone. It felt like a charge placed in his keeping. Then Mary returned, breathless, holding a card on a silver tray she must have taken from some side table in panic. "Your Grace." "My lady." This was delivered to Lady Honoria's carriage before it was brought round. Lady Honoria took the card. Her face hardened as she read. Then she handed it to Cressida. The message was written in the Marchioness of Alton's elegant hand. "Lady Cressida Vale is overwrought, unreliable, and not to be credited in any account she gives tonight." Cressida read it once. No color left her face because there was none to spare. Lucian felt his shame sharpen into purpose. The Altons had already begun. Lady Honoria Pell's carriage did not hurry through Mayfair, and that restraint saved Cressida more completely than speed would have done. A hurried departure would have looked like flight. A measured one looked like rank exercising preference. Wrapped in the Duke of Westhaven's cloak, with Lady Honoria seated beside her and Mary opposite, Cressida watched the lamps of Alton House fall behind the carriage windows until the bright front disappeared into the long, polished darkness of the street. Only then did she realize she had been holding her injured hand too tightly against her skirt. Her finger throbbed in small, precise beats. It was a ridiculous pain for a night that had taken so much else. "Give me your hand," Lady Honoria said. It was not an order, though it had the habit of one. Cressida obeyed because refusal would have required more strength than she wished to spend. Lady Honoria examined the scratch by the light of the carriage lamp, her face revealing neither alarm nor pity. "Clean enough. Unpleasant enough. Not fatal enough for anyone to be poetic over it." Mary gave a tiny startled breath that might have become laughter if fear had not caught it first. Cressida looked at the girl. "Mary, you should not have come with us." "His Grace said I was to be safe, my lady." "Dukes can say many things." "So can marchionesses," Lady Honoria said. "Tonight, I have decided to prefer the Duke." Cressida drew her hand back. "That may prove unwise." "My dear, at my age, wisdom is merely the name society gives to decisions it has not yet had time to criticize." The carriage turned onto a quieter street. Lady Honoria's house was smaller than Alton House but older, with a square dignity that did not beg to be admired. A footman opened the door before the carriage had fully settled. No one asked whether Cressida was ill. No one exclaimed over the cloak. No servant stared longer than duty required. That, too, was a kind of mercy. In the drawing-room, a fire had been stirred to life, and tea appeared with the speed of a household trained by a woman who considered fuss an insult to distress. Lady Honoria placed Cressida in a chair near the hearth, not on the sofa where fainting girls were arranged, but in a straight-backed chair suitable for a person expected to think. Mary was given bread, tea, and a place near the side table until further arrangements could be made. Cressida noticed. So did Lucian Harbury when he arrived 15 minutes later, admitted by the butler without announcement and shown in only after Lady Honoria had approved it. He had removed his hat and gloves. His evening coat was still immaculate, which made the strain about his mouth more visible. He stopped just inside the room and bowed, first to Lady Honoria, then to Cressida. "Not too deeply. Not theatrically. Enough." "Lady Cressida," he said. "Lady Honoria." "Mary." Mary nearly dropped her cup at being addressed by a duke. Lady Honoria lifted one brow. "You have acquired manners since the garden passage." Continue. Lucian accepted the rebuke with a slight inclination of his head. May I speak? Cressida looked at the fire. That has never seemed difficult for your grace. No, the answer came without defense. Listening has proved the greater failure. Lady Honoria sat down with the air of a judge who intended to enjoy the proceedings only if they deserved it. Then try that first. Lucian took the torn piece of glove from inside his coat and placed it on the small table between them. He did not hand it to Cressida. He did not make her touch it. The fragment looked unbearably small against the polished wood, a white scrap carrying more truth than the crowded corridor had cared to bear. There is wax on it, he said. The color matches the seal on the letter. Cressida kept her eyes on the glove. Anyone might have used such wax. Yes. There is also a blue-green thread caught in the tear. It does not belong to your gown or to Lady Beatrice's shawl. Lady Honoria leaned forward. Blue-green? A metallic thread. Possibly from trimming. Possibly from a bracelet setting. Cressida remembered Beatrice's wrist in the corridor, the pale glint beneath her glove, the quick flash when her fingers closed around Cressida. She wore a bracelet tonight. I saw it. Lucian's voice cooled. Too late. Cressida's bare hand curled beneath the cloak. You did not see too late. You believed too late. Silence followed. The fire gave a soft crack. Lucian did not look away. Yes. That single word disturbed her more than protest would have done. Cressida had prepared herself for explanations, for rank dressed as regret, for some elegant arrangement by which the Duke of Westhaven might emerge less guilty than his words had made him. She had not prepared herself for admission. I owe you an apology, he said. You offered one in the garden. No. I named my mistake in the garden. I have not yet repaired it. Can it be repaired? His face tightened, but the answer was steady. Not privately. The phrase entered the room and settled there. Lady Honoria's gaze sharpened with approval. Cressida looked at him at last. A sentence spoken before a room cannot be mended beside a fire. I know. Do you? Because society will forgive you for speaking wrongly far sooner than it will forgive me for being spoken of at all. Then society must be made to hear differently. Cressida gave a small, humorless smile. Society is not a pupil, Your Grace. It does not learn because truth is placed before it. No. It learns when people it cannot ignore refuse to repeat the lie. Lady Honoria tapped one finger against her teacup. That is nearly sensible. Do not spoil it by becoming grand. Lucian glanced at her. I have sent for my solicitor, Mr. Harcourt. Quietly. I want him to look into Mr. Silas Venn and the Alton accounts. Cressida stiffened. My accounts are not yours to examine. No, my aunt will say I am greedy. She has already said you are unreliable. And you think papers will make me reliable? No. I think papers may reveal why she needs you discredited. Cressida looked back to the torn glove. She hated that the logic was sound. She hated more that it gave the night shape. A random humiliation could be survived as cruelty. A planned one meant someone had needed her destroyed. I heard only fragments, she said slowly. Debt. A letter. Your Grace. My name. Lady Honoria's expression changed. When? Before the assembly. I passed the morning room. Beatrice and my aunt were speaking. I did not listen long. A pity, Lady Honoria said. Eavesdropping is one of the few accomplishments society condemns only when it is useful. Mary, who had sat very still near the side table, suddenly looked toward the door. A footman entered with a folded note on a tray. For Lady Cressida, my lady. Brought to the kitchen entrance by a boy who would not wait. Cressida did not reach for it. For a moment, no one moved. Then Lady Honoria took the note, glanced at the outside, and passed it to Cressida. The handwriting was unfamiliar, large and hurried. Cressida opened it. Only 5 words had been written inside. They have the other glove. The room seemed to narrow. Lucian crossed no closer, but everything in him became alert. Who sent it? Lady Honoria asked. It is unsigned. Cressida held the paper out. Her fingers were steady now because the fear had become too clean for trembling. The other glove. The left one. Lady Honoria's mouth thinned. Did you leave it at Alton House? In my chamber, I think. I cannot remember taking it off, but I must have when Mary helped me gather my things earlier. Mary rose so quickly her cup rattled. My lady, I saw one glove on your dressing table when I came to fetch you. I thought it was the torn one at first, but it wasn't. It was whole. Cressida closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, the firelight looked sharper. Then Beatrice has it. Or the Marchioness, Lucian said. They may use it to claim you tore the other yourself. Lady Honoria finished the thought. Or that you kept one glove hidden to invent an injury after the accusation. Cressida folded the note once. How efficient they are. The words were calm, but Lucian heard the exhaustion beneath them. He wanted, with a force that surprised him, to take the note, the glove, the entire machinery of accusation, and crush it beneath the weight of his name. That impulse was exactly why he remained still. She did not need another person seizing the story from her. Lady Cressida, he said, I will not act without your consent. Her eyes met his. That is a handsome promise now that action has become useful to you. Yes. It is late. Late is not useless. Lady Honoria's voice softened by 1 degree. Do you want the glove recovered quietly, or do you want them to believe they still possess it safely? Cressida looked at the torn fragment on the table. Opening pane. Middle clue. Ending unknown. No, she thought, not ending. Not yet. Let them keep it for now. Lucian's gaze sharpened. Why? Because if they think it can still be used, they will reveal how they intend to use it. The answer was not loud. It did not need to be. Lady Honoria smiled for the first time that night, brief and dangerous. There she is. Lucian looked at Cressida as though seeing, not the woman society had accused, but the mind it had underestimated. That attention might once have warmed her. Tonight, she accepted it only as evidence that he was learning. Very well, he said. Then we watch. No, Cressida replied. She folded the anonymous warning and placed it beside the torn glove. We listen. That is where everyone failed tonight. Outside, a carriage rolled past the quiet house, carrying some late guest away from some other polished room where reputations were still intact. Inside Lady Honoria's drawing room, the torn glove lay between a duke, a patroness, a maid, and a woman who had been called unreliable before she had been given permission to speak. The Altons had the other glove. For the first time all evening, Cressida was glad they did. By 11 o'clock the next morning, Lady Honoria Pell's drawing room had become the most dangerous room in Mayfair precisely because nothing improper appeared to be happening there. The curtains were drawn to admit a disciplined grey light. The tea service shone. A plate of almond cake sat untouched beside a vase of white narcissus. Cressida sat near the hearth in a gown Lady Honoria had sent from her own wardrobe, altered by pins and a housemaid's clever hands before breakfast. It was dark green, modest, and too fine to be mistaken for dependence. Her injured finger was wrapped in clean linen beneath a fresh glove, and the torn fragment from the night before lay locked in Lady Honoria's writing desk, not hidden from fear, but preserved for timing. Mary had been placed temporarily under Lady Honoria's protection in the servants' hall, where no Alton footman could reach her without first passing a butler who looked as if he had been carved from English oak for the specific purpose of denying entry. Lucian arrived before the first caller, which Cressida found both reassuring and inconvenient. He did not sit beside her. He took a position near the mantel, far enough away to satisfy propriety, near enough that anyone entering would understand he had not withdrawn his notice. Lady Honoria occupied the central chair like a general who had chosen lace instead of armor. You need not answer any question you dislike, she told Cressida. Silence can be dignified. Cressida looked at the folded morning newspaper lying beside the tea tray. No printed scandal had appeared yet, but that meant little. London often destroyed a woman by breakfast conversation long before ink had time to dry. Silence has been dignified for years, she said. It has not been useful. Lucian's gaze lifted from the fire, but he did not speak. She noticed that, She wished she had not. The first caller arrived 5 minutes later. Lady Fenton came with her unmarried daughter and the expression of a woman who had dressed concern in lavender silk. She kissed Lady Honoria's cheek, bowed to the Duke with visible pleasure, and gave Cressida the kind of look usually reserved for cracked porcelain that might still be displayed if turned carefully toward the wall. "My dear Lady Cressida," she said, settling into a chair without waiting to be pressed. "We were so distressed to hear you were unwell last night." "Were you?" Cressida asked. Lady Fenton blinked. Lucian glanced down, and Lady Honoria reached for the teapot as though hiding amusement behind domestic duty. "Indeed," Lady Fenton continued. "So sudden a departure always invites worry. A sudden accusation does the same." The daughter lowered her eyes at once. Lady Fenton's smile tightened. "Of course. Poor thing. These little misunderstandings can become so enlarged when one is overwrought." Cressida felt the old instinct rise, the trained reflex to soften, to excuse, to make herself smaller so the room would not be embarrassed by her injury. Her gloved hand rested on the chair arm. Beneath the silk, the scratch pulsed once. "I was not overwrought," she said. "I was falsely accused." The sentence landed with the clean sound of a drop pin. Lady Fenton turned toward Lucian, as though expecting him to rescue the room from directness. He looked back at her with perfect ducal blankness. "Yes," he said. "Lady Cressida was falsely accused. It was not a speech. It did not need to be." Lady Fenton's daughter looked up, startled by the simplicity of it. Lady Fenton rearranged her shawl. "How very strong of you both to phrase it so firmly." "Truth is often firmer than gossip," Lady Honoria said. "It has fewer accessories." 2 more callers arrived before Lady Fenton could reply, then a third. Within 20 minutes, the room held enough silk, feathers, and suppressed appetite to season a scandal for all London. They came with calling cards and concern. They came to see whether Cressida's eyes were red. They came to hear whether the Duke would speak. Most of all, they came to discover whether a poor relation would apologize for having been publicly injured in a way that inconvenienced better people. Mrs. Armitage, wife of a wealthy baronet, leaned forward with the air of a woman offering practical wisdom. "My dear, there is no shame in retiring from town for a little while. Bath can be very soothing. Or some quiet relation in the country." "I have been quiet among relations for several years," Cressida replied. "It has not improved them." A faint cough came from behind one fan. Lady Honoria's mouth twitched. Lucian's expression did not alter, but Cressida sensed attention from him as tangibly as warmth from the fire. Mrs. Armitage coloured. "I only meant that London can be unforgiving. London forgives a great deal when the sinner has a carriage fine enough to block the street." Lady Fenton's daughter made a small sound that she quickly disguised by sipping tea. Lady Fenton shot her a warning glance. Cressida looked at the women before her, each one polished by rank, marriage, or wealth, and felt something inside her settle into place. She had spent years believing dignity required her to absorb insult without leaving a mark upon the air. But perhaps dignity also allowed a woman to say the table had been struck when everyone heard the blow. "I will not leave London because others require me to be absent from my own defense," she said. "I will not apologize for a letter I did not write. I will not pretend I was confused because confusion would be more convenient than malice. If anyone wishes to repeat that I am unreliable, I ask only that she attach her name to the sentence." No one moved. For one long moment, even the fire seemed to hold still. Then Lady Honoria poured tea as if the world had not shifted beneath the carpet. "Sugar, Lady Fenton." Lady Fenton accepted none. The callers began to speak of safer things, which meant they spoke even more dangerously. A musicale. A carriage accident that had injured no one important. The new trimming seen on Lady Beatrice Alton's gown. It was Miss Fenton, the daughter, who said it without meaning to. "Lady Beatrice did look very well last evening. Mamma said the blue-green bracelet was new. I thought it rather bold with that gown, but Lady Beatrice always knows how to be admired." Cressida did not look at Lucian. She did not need to. The air near the mantel changed. Lady Honoria set down her cup. "Blue-green?" Miss Fenton grew nervous under so much sudden attention. "Yes." Little stones, I think. Or enamel. I only noticed because it caught on her glove while she was laughing with Lord Ambrose Lyle. She said the clasp was troublesome. Lucian spoke at last. Before or after Lady Cressida left the main room? Miss Fenton swallowed. Before, I believe. No, after. I am not certain. Certainty is not required, Lady Honoria said gently. Memory often improves when no one is trying to force it into manners. Lady Fenton rose too quickly. We have trespassed on you long enough. Have you? Lady Honoria asked. How efficient. The departure began a chain of smaller departures. Cards were gathered. Skirts whispered. Expressions rearranged themselves into sympathy for use in the next drawing room. At the door, Miss Fenton lingered half a step behind her mother and looked at Cressida. I didn't think you wrote it, she whispered. Not after you spoke just now. Cressida answered before gratitude could make her weak. Then remember that when someone asks you to laugh. The girl nodded, frightened and thoughtful, and went out. When the last caller had gone, the room felt larger and less airless. Cressida remained seated because standing would have revealed that her knees were not as steady as her voice had been. Lady Honoria waited until the front door closed below. Well, she said. You have ruined several breakfasts. Cressida looked at her. I beg your pardon. Do not. They needed it. Lucian left the mantel and came no nearer than the edge of the tea table. Lady Cressida. She looked up. I said nothing you needed to correct. No, he said. You said what I should have allowed you room to say last night. The words were not polished. That made them harder to dismiss. Before she could answer, a footman entered with a silver salver. From Alton House, my lady. Delivered by hand. Lady Honoria took the sealed invitation, read it, and her face became very still. The Marchioness requests the honour of our company at supper tomorrow evening. She passed the card to Cressida. The script was elegant, the wording faultless, the insult beneath it sharpened to a blade. Lady Beatrice hopes Lady Cressida will attend, so that all unhappy confusion may be put to rest among friends. Cressida looked at the card, then at Lucian, then at Lady Honoria. The other glove was still in Alton hands. The bracelet had been seen. The room was being prepared. Among friends, she said softly. How brave of them to choose witnesses. The supper invitation had been written as a courtesy, but every loop of the Marchioness of Alton's hand carried the shape of a challenge. By the following evening, Cressida understood that refusing it would give Alton House the very story it wanted. A guilty woman withdraws. A frightened woman disappears. A dependent woman accepts whatever explanation her betters provide. Lady Honoria read the invitation twice after breakfast and once more before the carriage was called, not because she needed to remember the words, but because she enjoyed disliking them accurately. They wish to gather witnesses before striking, she said, fastening a jet brooch at her throat. Then they shall have witnesses. Cressida stood before the glass in Lady Honoria's spare chamber, wearing the dark green gown again, now properly adjusted by a sempstress who had arrived with pins, discretion, and no questions. Fresh gloves covered both hands. The injured finger ached faintly beneath the silk. The torn fragment remained locked in Lady Honoria's desk. The other glove, if the warning had told the truth, waited at Alton House. I do not want his grace to speak before I do, Cressida said. Lady Honoria met her eyes in the mirror. Have you told him? No, then do so. Men, even clever ones, are not famous for discovering instructions hidden in female silence. Lucian arrived in the entry hall 10 minutes later. He wore black again, severe and faultless, but there was nothing decorative in his composure tonight. He looked like a man going to a formal execution and determined that the condemned should not be the wrong person. Lady Honoria remained within earshot as propriety required. Cressida stopped 2 yards from him. Your Grace, if they accuse me tonight, I will answer first. He looked at her steadily. Yes. She had expected negotiation. The simple acceptance unsettled her. You won't correct me in order to rescue me. No, you won't turn my defense into your apology. A flicker moved across his face. No, and if the room waits for you instead of me. Then it will wait longer than it likes. Lady Honoria made a satisfied sound behind them. Cressida should have felt steadier. Instead, the promise touched a place still sore from the corridor. Trust did not return all at once. It approached like a wary animal, stopping whenever the hand extended too quickly. They went to Alton House in Lady Honoria's carriage, with Lucian following in his own. That, too, had been Cressida's request. No one would say she arrived under the Duke's possession. When the carriage halted before the familiar bright steps, she saw that more guests had been invited than a family supper required. There were 2 patronesses who had called on Lady Honoria that morning, Lord and Lady Fenton, Mrs. Armitage, Mr. Ambrose Lyle, and several lesser relations arranged like witnesses who had been told in advance where to stand. The dining room glittered with silver and glass. Every candle was lit. Every place had been chosen. Cressida was seated far enough from Lady Honoria to appear isolated, but close enough to Beatrice that comparison would be unavoidable. Beatrice wore white muslin with blue-green trimming threaded through the sleeves. On her wrist gleamed the bracelet. It was delicate, expensive, and unmistakable. Little blue-green stones sat in a gold setting, their clasp hidden beneath the edge of her glove. Cressida saw it. So did Lucian. His eyes moved once from the bracelet to Cressida, asking nothing aloud. She gave the smallest nod. The supper began with soup, fish, and a performance of normality so polished it seemed almost comic. The Marchioness spoke of the opera. Lady Fenton praised the hothouse strawberries. Mr. Lyle laughed at remarks that were not amusing. Beatrice offered Cressida a soft smile across the table. "You look much recovered, cousin. How kind of you to measure me." A spoon touched porcelain too sharply somewhere down the table. Beatrice's lashes fluttered. "I only meant that we were all concerned." Concern travelled quickly last night. The Marchioness set down her glass. "My dear Cressida, this is precisely why I hoped for tonight. Misunderstanding grows when wounded feelings are allowed to feed upon themselves." Lady Honoria cut into the silence before Cressida could answer. How fortunate that facts require less feeding. The Marchioness gave her a civil smile sharpened at the edge. "Indeed. Facts are why I thought a small gathering of friends might be useful." At the word friends, Lucian's expression did not change, but Mr. Lyle shifted in his chair. The servants withdrew after the second course with unusual completeness. Only the butler remained near the sideboard. That was when the Marchioness rose. "I dislike unpleasantness," she began, with the serenity of a woman who had arranged it beautifully. "But my daughter's name, this house's honor, and Lady Cressida's own future have been placed in a painful position." Cressida felt the room turn toward her. Not physically. Worse. Socially. Every attention became a finger. "Last night," the Marchioness continued, "a letter was found under circumstances that distressed us all. Lady Cressida denied writing it. We wish to believe her. However, certain matters have since come to light." Beatrice looked down at her plate as though the burden of virtue had become heavy. Mr. Lyle reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. Cressida recognized the shape before he placed it on the table. "This," he said, "is a draft discovered in Lady Cressida's chamber after her departure." A murmur moved through the guests. Lucian remained still. He was looking at Cressida, not the paper. She understood the gift of that restraint. The Marchioness lifted another object from a small velvet reticule. A white glove. Whole, clean, and terrible. And this was found hidden with it. Cressida's heart beat once, hard. The left glove lay in the Marchioness's hand like a polite little corpse. "A matching glove," Lady Fenton whispered. "How dreadful." Beatrice raised her face. Her eyes shone. "Cressida, why would you hide it if there was nothing to hide?" Cressida looked at her cousin's wrist. The bracelet caught the candlelight. One side of the clasp seemed oddly smooth, as though recently pressed or adjusted. "May I see the glove?" she asked. The Marchioness hesitated. "My dear, there is no need to prolong this. You presented it as fact. I would like to see the fact." The room stilled. Lady Honoria's mouth curved very slightly. The Marchioness passed the glove to the butler, who brought it to Cressida. She laid it flat beside her plate. Her own stitching was visible near the cuff, but there was something wrong with the finger seams. They had been tugged, not worn. More importantly, a faint trace of wax marked the inside edge. She turned it carefully, letting the guests watch her hands. "This is my glove," she said. Beatrice's breath caught in triumph. Cressida continued. "And it proves only that someone entered my room after I left Alton House." The triumph faded. "That is a wild claim," Mr. Lyle said. "It is an exact one." Cressida looked at him. "You seem very ready to identify wildness in other people's statements, sir. Perhaps practice has made you quick." A small sound rose and died behind a fan. The Marchioness's voice cooled. "Cressida, you are forgetting yourself." "No. That was last night." She looked at Beatrice. "May I see your bracelet?" Beatrice went utterly still. The room understood the question before anyone explained it. Lucian did not move, but his voice entered the silence with quiet authority. "Lady Beatrice, since Lady Cressida has been asked to answer evidence placed before witnesses, it is only proper that any related object be viewed by the same witnesses." The Marchioness turned to him. "Your Grace, surely you do not mean to dignify this accusation." "I mean to dignify the search for truth. That is what your ladyship invited us here to conduct." Lady Honoria's eyes brightened. "Beautifully phrased. Nearly humble." Beatrice gave a trembling laugh. "This is absurd. My bracelet has nothing to do with Cressida's letter." "Then it will suffer no harm from being seen," Cressida said. Beatrice placed her hand over the bracelet. "I don't like being spoken to as though I'm on trial." "Neither did I." The words landed softly, but the room felt them. Mr. Lyle rose halfway. "This has gone too far." Lucian turned his head. "Sit down." The command was not loud. Mr. Lyle Saturday. The Marchioness's face hardened beneath its powder. "Your Grace, you forget that this is my house." "I remember perfectly. I also remember that your ladyship invited witnesses to hear an accusation. Any witness who has heard it may remain to hear the answer, unless he or she prefers to be known as someone who enjoys half a truth." No one stood. No one wished to be described that way by a duke. Beatrice's hand trembled over the bracelet. At last she extended her wrist, but before Cressida could look closer, the Marchioness gave a small gasp. Her hand flew to her breast. The room turned at once. She swayed with exquisite timing, one jeweled hand gripping the chair back, her face gone pale by effort or art. "Mamma!" Beatrice cried, snatching her wrist back. Chairs scraped. Lady Fenton rose. Mrs. Armitage called for salts. The butler hurried forward. The confrontation shattered into concern exactly as the Marchioness had intended. Cressida remained seated, the glove still before her, watching Beatrice fold her bracelet beneath her other hand. Lucian saw it too. Across the table, their eyes met. This time, he did not speak for her. He waited. Cressida placed one finger on the glove and held his gaze. The trap had not closed. It had only shown its hinge. By the time Lady Honoria's carriage drew away from Alton House, the supper had already begun transforming itself into several different versions of the same lie. In one drawing-room by midnight, it would be said that Lady Cressida Vale had accused her cousin out of envy. In another, that the Duke of Westhaven had grown strangely attentive to a woman whose reputation had become inconveniently fragile. By breakfast, someone would add that Lady Beatrice Alton had nearly fainted from the cruelty of it all, though it had been the Marchioness who had performed that service with memorable timing. Cressida sat opposite Lady Honoria, her hands folded in her lap, the recovered left glove wrapped in a handkerchief beside her. It looked harmless now. That was the genius of small objects in polite society. They could be planted, displayed, doubted, and dismissed without ever raising their voices. "You were right not to press further tonight," Lady Honoria said. "A woman who has just watched her mother nearly expire from theatrical convenience cannot be asked to surrender jewelry." "She did not nearly expire," Cressida said. "No. But she did it with conviction." The remark should have amused her. It did not. Cressida could still feel the table's attention on her skin, the moment when Beatrice's bracelet had almost become evidence and then vanished beneath a mother's staged weakness. Lucian's carriage followed at a discreet distance. She had not looked back when leaving. She had not needed to. She had felt him there, controlled and silent, carrying the unsaid weight of a man who wanted to act and had, for once, been forced to wait. At Lady Honoria's house, the footman had scarcely closed the door before Lucian was admitted behind them. He had removed his gloves, and the set of his mouth suggested he had spent the short journey restraining several decisions. "Lady Cressida," he said, bowing first to her, then Lady Honoria. "I have made an arrangement that may offer protection until we can prove the matter fully." Cressida's fingers tightened around the handkerchief. "An arrangement?" Lady Honoria paused near the tea table. "Westhaven, I advise care. Your tone has begun to sound useful in a dangerous way." Lucian accepted the warning, but his eyes remained on Cressida. "I can place you formally under the protection of the House of Harbury. Lady Honoria may remain your immediate hostess. My name will make it plain that any attack upon your reputation is an attack I will answer." For a moment, no one spoke. It was not an ungenerous offer. That was what made it difficult. Cressida could imagine the effect before dawn. Doors that had begun to close would hesitate. Women who had laughed behind fans would rephrase their cruelty as concern. Men like Mr. Lyle would discover caution. A duke's name could do what truth alone could not. It could make people afraid to enjoy the lie. "No," she said. Lucian's expression did not change, but something in his stillness sharpened. "No? No, Your Grace." Lady Honoria looked from one to the other and sat down without touching the tea. "This may become educational." Lucian took one measured breath. "May I ask why?" "Because if you put me under your house's protection before the truth is known, society will not say I have been wronged. It will say I have been claimed. That is not my intention. Intentions have performed poorly this week." He flinched. It was barely visible, but she saw it. "You would not be dependent on me." "Would I not?" "Your name would stand between me and ruin. Your servants would carry messages. Your solicitors would ask questions. Your rank would decide who dared speak. That is dependence, even if it wears better gloves. I am trying to prevent them from destroying you. By making me belong to someone too powerful to insult." Her voice remained quiet. That made it worse. "I have just left one house where my safety depended on obedience. I will not exchange it for another, however honorable the door." Lucian looked at her as if the words had forced open a chamber in his mind he had not known was locked. Lady Honoria's gaze softened by a fraction. "Very good," she murmured. "Painful, but very good." Cressida turned slightly away, not because she regretted the words, but because she feared their cost. To refuse help when one had so little was its own kind of terror. She had a temporary roof, an injured name, one torn glove, one recovered glove, and no certainty that London would not prefer Beatrice's tears to her truth. Lucian stepped no closer. "Then I will not make the announcement." She looked back. "Just like that. Just like that. You are not going to explain why I misunderstand my own interest. No, you are not going to say I am too proud." "You are proud," he said. "I have not found that to be a defect." Something in her chest moved, and she disliked him for causing it. "Then what will you do?" "Find evidence that does not require your reputation to lean upon mine." Before she could answer, Lady Honoria's butler entered with a card and a folded note. "Mr. Harcourt waits below, my lady. He says the matter is urgent." Lucian turned at once. "Send him in." Lady Honoria lifted a brow. "My house, Westhaven. Forgive me. I shall, eventually. Send him in, Barlow." Mr. Harcourt proved to be a compact gentleman in sober black, with spectacles, a careful mouth, and the exhausted expression of a solicitor accustomed to finding rot beneath polished wood. He bowed to the room and placed a slim packet on the table. "Your Grace." "Lady Honoria." "Lady Cressida. I beg pardon for the hour, but Mr. Silas Venn has left his rooms." Lucian's eyes darkened. "Left London?" "It appears so. His clerk claims he departed for Brighton on private business. I doubt Brighton has much to do with it. What did you find?" Harcourt opened the packet and withdrew a copied page. A ledger fragment from a lodging house near Chancery Lane. Then used it for private memoranda, carelessly disguised as household expenses. There are several references to Alton obligations. One entry from 3 days ago reads, Sapphire clasp, paid through A. Lady Honoria leaned forward. A for Alton? Likely. There is also a sum matching a jeweller's repair deposit. Cressida felt the recovered glove in her lap like a pulse. Sapphire clasp, she repeated. Beatrice's bracelet was blue-green. Not sapphire in value, perhaps, Harcourt said. The phrase may refer to colour or setting. Men like Venn are not always precise when stealing from fools. Lucian's mouth tightened. Can you identify the jeweller? Not yet. But the entry tells us the clasp mattered before the supper. If Lady Beatrice's bracelet was repaired after last night, there will be a record. Lady Honoria looked satisfied. Then the hinge has begun to squeak. The butler entered again before anyone could answer. This time his expression had lost its smoothness. Forgive me, my lady. A rumour has reached the servants' entrance from Lord Fenton's coachman. Lady Honoria sighed. How democratic scandal is. Speak. The butler looked at Cressida, then Lucian. It is being said that His Grace is defending Lady Cressida because he was alone with her in the garden passage after she left Alton House. The room changed. Not loudly. It was worse than loudness. Cressida felt the old net tighten, one thread at a time. If she accepted Lucian's protection now, the rumour would feed on it. If she refused him, society would call her ungrateful. If he proposed, they would say guilt had forced his hand. If he did not, they would say even he knew she could not be made respectable. Beatrice had not lost the supper. She had moved the battlefield. Lucian's face became cold enough to frighten a less tired room. Who started it? No name was given, Your Grace. There is always a name. There is often a mouth hired to hide one, Lady Honoria said. Sit down in your temper, Westhaven. It is blocking the lamps. He did not sit, but he looked at Cressida instead of the door. That saved something. Perhaps not much. Perhaps enough. Lady Cressida, he said, I will deny it publicly. And they will ask why you trouble yourself. I will say because it is false. They already know truth can be made to arrive late. Then I will make it arrive louder. No, the word was sharper than she intended. Everyone looked at her. Cressida stood, still holding the handkerchief around the glove. No, she said again, quieter. If you thunder on my behalf, they will say I have taught you the lines. If you offer me your name, they will say I trapped you into it. If you shelter me under Harbury protection, they will say I climbed from poor relation to ducal possession by way of a dark passage. Lucian's jaw worked once. What do you ask of me, then? Cressida faced him fully. Her voice did not tremble. Do you believe me without the glove? He went very still. The question stripped the room of strategy. There was no ledger in it, no clasp, no witness, no fragment of torn silk. Only the thing that had failed first. Belief. Lucian looked at her for a long moment. Yes. Because of Mary. No, because of the wax. No, because of Venn. No, his voice lowered. The glove showed me where to look. It is not why I believe you now. Cressida held his gaze until the word settled into the bruised place where his earlier sentence had lived. They did not heal it. Not yet. But they stood beside it, refusing to let it be the final word. Lady Honoria rose. Then we shall proceed correctly. No public claim. No gallant thunder. No proposal wearing a bandage over a wound. We need the jeweller, the ledger, the bracelet, and the right room. Harcourt nodded. I can begin at first light. Begin tonight, Lucian said. This time Lady Honoria did not correct him. Cressida looked down at the handkerchief in her hands. The other glove was whole, but it no longer comforted her. Whole things could lie as easily as broken ones. Let them speak of the garden, she said. Let them think I must run toward your name to survive it. Lucian watched her carefully. And will you? No, she placed the glove on Lady Honoria's table beside Harcourt's ledger copy. I will make them explain why they needed the rumour before the evidence was finished. Outside, the late city moved in wheels and hooves and whispers. Inside, the Duke of Westhaven said nothing. For once, his silence did not abandon her. It stood guard. By the next afternoon, the rumours had travelled farther than Cressida had in years. They had crossed Mayfair in closed carriages, slipped beneath drawing-room doors with calling cards, and settled upon tea-tables where women repeated them in voices gentle enough to pass for pity. Lady Honoria's butler had brought in 3 refusals to invitations Cressida had never intended to accept, 2 cards from women who wished to be seen withholding judgment while doing precisely that, and 1 anonymous note advising her to seek quiet in the country before worse quiet was arranged for her. Cressida read none of them twice. At noon, she asked Lady Honoria for the carriage. To go where? Lady Honoria said, though her eye suggested she already knew. Alton House. Lucian, who had arrived with Mr. Harcourt's latest message and had taken care to remain by the window instead of too near her chair, turned at once. No, Cressida looked at him. Your Grace. He stopped himself. She saw the correction happen. It cost him less time than it once would have, but more pride. Forgive me, he said. That was badly put. It was honestly put. Then honest and badly put. I would prefer you not return there. So would I. Lady Honoria set down her embroidery. And yet? Cressida lifted her chin. My mother's letters are still in my room. So is the small rosewood box that belonged to her. If I do not take them now, my aunt will discover their value to me and use them as leash or firewood. Lucian's jaw tightened. I will come in with you. No, Lady Cressida, no, she repeated, not sharply, but with enough weight to stop him. If you enter Alton House beside me, my aunt will make the entire visit about your protection. If you wait outside, it remains my departure. Lady Honoria nodded once. Correct. Lucian looked as if the word had been a physical restraint placed upon him. Then Lady Honoria goes in. Yes, Cressida said. And Mary. At that, Mary, who had been arranging a shawl near the door, looked up in alarm. My lady, I don't need to go. You do not need to be punished for what happened. If her ladyship sees me, she'll dismiss me. Not from a house I no longer belong to, Cressida said. She surprised herself with the firmness of it. The sentence stood in the room, plain and irrevocable. I no longer belong. Lady Honoria rose. Then we shall go before courage has time to overdress itself. They travelled in Lady Honoria's carriage, with Lucian following and stopping across the street from Alton House, where his presence could be known without being offered as possession. The air had turned damp, softening the edges of the square and darkening the front steps Cressida had climbed so often with borrowed gratitude. As she entered, the old habits rose at once. Do not look too long at the flowers. Do not touch the polished rail. Do not pause before portraits that are not yours. Do not appear to need anything. The butler's face altered when he saw Mary behind her and Lady Honoria at her side. Lady Cressida. Her ladyship is in the morning room. I am going to my chamber, Cressida said. You may inform her if you choose. He hesitated, then bowed. The chamber at the back of the house looked smaller than it had that morning and colder than it had ever felt while she lived in it. Her brushes remained on the dressing table. Her shawls were folded too neatly, as if someone had already searched beneath them and then repented only of disorder. The empty space where the glove had lain seemed more eloquent than any accusation. Cressida crossed to the little writing desk and opened the bottom drawer. The rosewood box was there, pushed to the back. She touched the lid once before lifting it out. Inside lay her mother's letters tied with faded blue ribbon, a miniature portrait of her father, and a pressed sprig of lavender wrapped in tissue. A woman's life could be reduced to so little when other people controlled the cupboards. Behind her, Mary made a small sound. Cressida turned. The girl stood beside the wardrobe, pale, holding a torn cap ribbon in her hands. They searched here, Mary whispered. And if anything was misplaced, you would be blamed. Mary's eyes filled. Mrs. Day said I must have taken the glove. She said poor girls always take what soft ladies leave lying about. Cressida felt a quiet anger settle in her body like a cloak. Then we shall not let her keep that story. She took one of the handkerchiefs from her drawer, wrapped the cap ribbon inside it, and placed it in the pocket of her reticule. If anyone mentions theft, you will say I collected this myself as proof the room was disturbed after my departure. Mary looked at her as though kindness had become incomprehensible. But my lady, they'll say you're lying for me. Then they will have to accuse us both. I find falsehood grows less elegant when it must be repeated. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Lady Honoria moved to the door and opened it before the knock came. The Marchioness of Alton stood outside, dressed in violet silk and outrage. Beatrice hovered behind her, pale and beautiful, her wrists bare. No bracelet. Cressida noticed at once. So did Lady Honoria. Cressida, the Marchioness said. You returned without requesting permission. I returned for what is mine. Little enough, surely. Enough. The Marchioness's gaze flicked to the rosewood box. Sentimental objects can become confused with property belonging to this house. Cressida held the box closer, not protectively, but plainly. These are my mother's letters. Your mother left many difficulties behind her. She left me tenderness. Others managed the difficulties. Beatrice's lips parted as if to speak, but the Marchioness lifted one hand. You are making a very grave mistake. Lady Honoria may indulge this performance for a day or two. His Grace may be fascinated by wounded dignity for even longer. But fascination fades, Cressida. A woman without fortune, without household, and without obedient gratitude will find doors closing faster than pride can open them. Cressida walked to the small table beside the bed. The key to the chamber lay there, attached to a narrow brass ring. She picked it up and turned it once in her palm. How many times had she feared losing access to this room? How many times had she mistaken permission to sleep beneath a roof for belonging? She placed the key on the table. The sound was very small. It ended something large. Then let them close. The Marchioness's face hardened. You will receive no allowance from this house. I have received no kindness from it. The allowance will be easier to miss. Beatrice's eyes flashed. Cressida, don't be foolish. You can't live on speeches. No, Cressida said. But I have lived too long on silence. She turned to Mary. Take your shawl. Mary looked terrified, then obeyed. The Marchioness stepped forward. That girl is in my service. Lady Honoria's voice cut in, cool and smooth. Not if she has been threatened for telling the truth in a matter I witnessed. She will be placed elsewhere by evening. You overstep. Constantly, Lady Honoria said. It keeps me young. Cressida moved past the Marchioness without brushing her sleeve. That seemed to offend her aunt more than defiance. On the landing, she did not look back. She carried the rosewood box down the stairs, through the hall, and out of Alton House under a sky the colour of pewter. Across the street, Lucian stood beside his carriage. He did not come forward until Lady Honoria had descended the steps and propriety had arranged itself around them. Even then, he stopped at a careful distance. His eyes went first to Cressida's face, then to the box in her hands, then to Mary behind her. Where do you wish to go now? He asked. The question was simple. It was also the first door that had opened that day without demanding she enter. Before Cressida could answer, the wind lifted the blue ribbon tied around her mother's letters. One folded paper slipped loose from the rosewood box and fell against her glove. She caught it before it dropped. The handwriting was not her mother's. It was her father's solicitor's hand, faded but legible. Lady Honoria leaned close. Lucian remained still, waiting for permission. Cressida unfolded the paper. Her eyes moved over the lines once, then again more slowly. Marriage portion to be held in trust for Lady Cressida Vale until her majority or lawful settlement. Trustees named, Alton and Faircombe. Cressida felt the words open beneath her like a hidden flaw. She had not been merely sheltered. She had been kept. Lucian saw the change in her face. Lady Cressida? She looked up from the paper to the house she had just left. Behind its polished windows, her aunt's curtains did not move. Now, she said, her voice very quiet, I wish to know what else they have called charity because theft sounded less respectable. Mr. Harcourt did not take Lady Cressida Vale to the solicitor's office first. That, he explained in Lady Honoria's front parlour while the folded trust paper lay on the table between teacups gone cold, would give the Altons time to hear of it from the wrong clerk, the wrong errand boy, or the wrong man paid to stand outside a door. Instead, he sent a note by his own messenger to an elderly solicitor named Mr. Josiah Bell, who had once acted for the late Earl of Vale and had retired into a narrow house near Lincoln's Inn with his papers, his gout, and his caution. By 4 o'clock, Cressida sat in Lady Honoria's carriage with her mother's rosewood box beside her and Lucian Harbury riding opposite, though not so near that anyone seeing through the window could mistake concern for possession. Lady Honoria sat between propriety and command, which was where she preferred to sit. Mr. Bell may refuse to see us, Harcourt said from the forward seat, his hat balanced on his knee. Men who keep old truths often become fond of locked drawers. Then we shall admire his drawers until he opens them, Lady Honoria replied. Cressida looked down at the folded paper in her lap. Her father's name, written years ago, seemed both tender and accusing. All her life since his death, she had been told she must be grateful for what the Altons provided. A room. Dresses turned from Beatrice's discards. A place at the edge of society. If the paper meant what Harcourt believed it meant, then the charity she had been made to bow beneath might have been built partly from what was already hers. Lucian had said little since leaving Alton House. She found his silence less troubling now than his certainty had once been. When she had asked him to wait, he waited. When Harcourt discussed trustees and memoranda, he did not interrupt to make the matter grander. Yet his stillness had weight. It pressed against the carriage like a vow he had not been invited to speak. Mr. Bell's house stood in a narrow street smelling faintly of damp stone, ink, and horses waiting too long in the cold. The old solicitor received them in a book-lined room where dust had settled upon legal volumes with the dignity of old verdicts. He was thin, sharp-eyed, and wrapped in a dark coat despite the fire. When Harcourt introduced Cressida, Mr. Bell's fingers tightened on the head of his cane. Lady Cressida Vale, he said. You have your mother's eyes. The sentence struck more gently than she was prepared for. You knew her? I knew both your parents. Your father trusted too late and died too soon. Those are not uncommon failings among gentlemen with honourable tempers. Lucian's eyes moved to the shelves, then back to the solicitor. Mr. Bell, we need to know whether Lady Cressida's marriage portion was placed in trust. Mr. Bell's gaze sharpened. And why does the Duke of Westhaven ask? Cressida answered before Lucian could. He asks because I permitted him to accompany me. But the question is mine. The old man looked at her for a long second. Then he inclined his head. Good. Then I shall answer you. Yes. £10,000 and certain securities from your mother's settlement were to be held for you until your majority or lawful marriage settlement. Lady Honoria's fan went still. Cressida did not move. £10,000 was not merely comfort. It was choice. It was a roof that did not require obedience. It was gloves bought without apology. It was years of being told she survived on generosity while her own future sat behind someone else's key. Who held it? She asked. The Marquis of Alton and Sir Edmund Faircombe. Sir Edmund died 5 years ago. Alton should have applied for a proper accounting afterward. Did he? Mr. Bell looked toward the fire. No, the room held its breath around that small word. Harcourt leaned forward. Do you have copies? Some. Not all. I wrote twice to Alton House and received replies from the Marchioness stating that Lady Cressida remained comfortably maintained and that no disturbance of the funds was desirable until marriage. Cressida heard the phrase comfortably maintained and felt, absurdly, the cold of her old back chamber. Did you believe her? Mr. Bell's mouth tightened. I was retired, my lady. That is an explanation, not an excuse. He pushed himself up with effort and crossed to a cabinet. From an inner drawer, he removed a sealed packet, yellowed and tied with black thread. Your father asked that a memorandum be kept in case any question arose. I should have sent it sooner. I did not because Alton's name still opened doors, and yours, forgive me, had been made quiet. Lucian's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Mr. Bell placed the packet before Cressida. This identifies the trust, the original securities, and the intended use of the portion. It will not prove every misuse, but it proves that the money existed and that you had a claim. Cressida touched the thread. If I open this now? Harcourt answered gently. The Altons may say you are grasping at money to cover a scandal. Mr. Bell nodded. They may say you are unstable, resentful, or influenced by others. His eyes flicked briefly to Lucian. They may say His Grace hopes to make himself appear noble after last evening's unfortunate words. Lucian accepted the blow without changing expression. They would not be entirely wrong to call my words unfortunate. Mr. Bell looked faintly surprised. Few men of rank admit as much in rooms with witnesses. I am learning late. Cressida looked at him then. The words did not ask forgiveness. That was why they mattered. Lady Honoria leaned back. What of Silas Venn? Mr. Bell's face closed. A parasite with legal ink on his fingers. He purchases private debts, then sells silence at a profit. Alton has been in his reach for years. Could Venn have arranged the letter? Harcourt asked. He could arrange a bishop's sermon if the bishop owed him money. And Beatrice? Cressida asked. Her voice sounded colder than she felt. Mr. Bell hesitated. Lady Beatrice's name does not appear in my papers. But a young lady who needs a duke to rescue a sinking house may learn quickly from those who raised her. The answer was not comfort. It was worse because it was fair. The truth did not need Beatrice to be a monster. It only needed her to be willing. A knock came at the door. Mr. Bell's clerk entered with a sealed note. From Lady Honoria's house, sir. Brought after the party left. Lady Honoria took it, broke the seal, and read. Her expression sharpened with satisfaction and alarm together. The charity committee has confirmed tomorrow afternoon at my house. The Marchioness and Lady Beatrice have accepted. So have Lady Fenton, Mrs. Armitage, and 3 women who carried last night's gossip faster than their coachman carried them home. Harcourt looked to Cressida. That room will be useful. Dangerous, Mr. Bell corrected. Useful things often are, Lady Honoria said. Cressida held the sealed memorandum in both hands. The paper felt heavier than its size. If we wait until the committee, they will call me greedy before witnesses. If you speak now, they will call you greedy in every room where you are absent, Lucian said. At least tomorrow you may choose the room. She looked at him. You think I should use it publicly? I think you should decide when the truth has the strongest chance of surviving its first telling. Mr. Bell nodded slowly. That is well put. Lucian did not seem to notice the praise. His eyes remained on Cressida. My name can make people listen, but it cannot make them believe rightly if I speak before you. Something in her eased, not enough to be peace, but enough to breathe. Then tomorrow, she said. Not as a plea. As an answer. Harcourt gathered his notes. I will continue after Venn. If we find the jeweler connected to the clasp, the glove and bracelet become more than implication. Find him, Lucian said. Then he glanced at Lady Honoria and corrected himself. Please. Improvement, Lady Honoria observed. Mr. Bell pushed the sealed memorandum toward Cressida. Keep this close, my lady. And be careful. People who have lived comfortably on another person's silence do not surrender it because the truth knocks politely. Cressida placed the memorandum inside the rosewood box with her mother's letters. For a moment, the 2 histories rested together, tenderness and theft, grief and proof. As she rose, Lucian stepped toward the door, then stopped to let her pass first. It was a small courtesy. Or it would have been, once. Now it felt like an answer to every doorway where she had been told to stand aside. Outside, the street had darkened. The carriage lamps glowed through mist, and somewhere in the distance a church bell marked the hour. Cressida looked back once at Mr. Bell's narrow house, then down at the box in her hands. The torn glove had shown them where to look. The papers had shown them why someone needed her discredited. Tomorrow, the women who had watched her name become entertainment would be invited to watch the truth choose its witnesses. Lucian stood beside the carriage step, waiting. Lady Cressida, he said quietly, whatever happens tomorrow, I will not ask you to let me turn this into a proposal. The unexpectedness of it made her meet his eyes. Why say that now? Because I want to. And because wanting it gives me no right to use it. The city noise seemed to fall back for one breath. Cressida tightened her hold on the rosewood box. Then tomorrow, Your Grace, help me prove I was wronged before you ask me to believe I am wanted. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. She entered the carriage with Lady Honoria's hand beneath her elbow, not because she would have fallen, but because even strong women were allowed to be steadied. Behind them, Mr. Harcourt tucked the copied ledger into his case, and the old solicitor's door closed upon years of silence that had finally begun to open. The night before Lady Honoria Pell's charity committee, the house seemed to understand that dawn would ask it to serve as a battlefield. Servants moved softly through the corridors, laying fires, polishing glass, setting out extra chairs in the large drawing room, and pretending not to know that every chair had been placed for someone who had already chosen a side. Cressida stood alone for several minutes in the smaller drawing room, where the door had been left open and Lady Honoria sat with insight in the adjoining parlour, writing notes with the fierce calm of a woman arranging both tea and justice. The rosewood box rested on the table before Cressida. Inside it lay her mother's letters, Mr. Bell's sealed memorandum, and the folded trust paper that had changed the shape of her past. Beside the box, on a square of white linen, lay the recovered left glove. Whole. Clean. Almost smug in its usefulness to the wrong people. The torn fragment was not there. Lady Honoria had kept it locked away since the first night, and Cressida had not asked to see it again. Some evidence had weight because it proved a fact. Some had weight because it had once been part of a person trying not to break. At 8:30, Lucian was shown in. He stopped at the threshold and looked first toward the open door, where Lady Honoria's violet sleeve was plainly visible. Only then did he bow to Cressida. The small observance might have seemed unnecessary to another woman. To Cressida, it said he had learned that propriety was not a cage when it was used to protect choice instead of silence. Lady Cressida, he said. Lady Honoria. Westhaven, Lady Honoria called without looking up from her desk. If you say anything foolish, I shall hear it. I had assumed as much. Good. It saves time. Cressida nearly smiled. Nearly. Lucian crossed no farther than the table, then drew a narrow packet from inside his coat. Mr. Harcourt sent word. The air changed. Then? Cressida asked. Not yet found. But the jeweller was. Lucian placed a folded note beside the rosewood box. A Mr. Alden of Bond Street. He repaired a blue-green bracelet clasp yesterday morning, at Lady Beatrice's request. He remembers it because the clasp had lost one small tooth from the fastening, and because she insisted it be returned before the Alton supper. Cressida looked down at the note. She did not touch it. If she touched it, she feared her hand might show what her face refused. Yesterday morning, she said. After the glove tore. Yes. And before she presented the other glove as evidence against me. Yes. The answer was quiet, but it seemed to strike the room with the force of a bell. Lady Honoria's pen stopped in the adjoining parlour. Excellent, she said. Hateful, but excellent. Lucian removed something else from the packet. A small wrapped object, tied with plain thread. Mr. Alden also kept the broken piece. He said Lady Beatrice did not ask for it, and he thought it might be needed if the clasp failed again. This time, Cressida did reach out. Lucian did not place the object in her hand. He set it on the table and let her decide. She untied the thread. Inside the paper lay a tiny curved bit of gold, hardly larger than a seed, with a trace of blue-green silk caught along one edge. The room blurred for 1 second. Not from tears. From the strange exhaustion of being believed by metal when people had refused. That is what caught the glove, she said. So it appears. Lucian's voice had deepened, and when she looked up, his anger was visible only because he was holding it so still. Tomorrow, Lady Beatrice may deny knowing how it happened. But she cannot deny the repair. She will try. Yes. My aunt will say it proves nothing. She will try that as well. Cressida folded the paper around the broken clasp tooth again. You sound prepared for disappointment. I am prepared for dishonesty. It seems more practical. A silence followed, not empty, but full of the pieces now gathered between them: glove, wax, clasp, ledger, memorandum, rumor, apology still unpaid before the right witnesses. Lucian looked toward Lady Honoria in the next room, then back at Cressida. May I say something that is not strategy? Her pulse moved once at her throat. You may say it. I do not promise to receive it kindly. I have not earned kindness. She waited. He looked at the torn glove's absence, as if he could see it through the locked desk. Tomorrow, before Mr. Harcourt's papers, before the jeweller's note, before any witness is asked to speak, I will apologize. Publicly. Not after proof makes it safe. Before. Cressida's fingers stilled on the paper. Why? Because I was wrong before I understood why. Evidence explains the trap. It does not excuse my part in springing it. In the adjoining parlour, Lady Honoria made no sound. That was her way of listening very closely. Cressida looked toward the fire. Its light moved over the brass fender, over the table, over the clean glove that had been made to lie by remaining whole. If you apologize first, she said, some will think you are trying to influence the room. They may. Some will think you are performing humility. They may. Some will think I have guided you to it. Then they will underestimate us both. She turned back to him. And if tomorrow fails? The words came more softly than she intended. Lucian understood their size. She saw that he did. If the Marchioness twists the memorandum. If Beatrice weeps. If Mr. Lyle lies again. If the room prefers beauty and rank to truth. If all of it fails, Your Grace, will you still stand there? His face altered. It was not dramatic. His composure did not shatter. It simply became honest. Yes. Without the glove. Yes. Without the jeweler. Yes. Without the chance to appear noble. His gaze did not move from hers. Especially then. The answer entered her slowly, as if part of her had to inspect it for hidden hooks. She had been offered protection before. Shelter. Advice. Correction. Places to stand so long as she remained useful to someone else's story. This was different, or near enough to different that it frightened her. I don't know how to trust you, she said inside the safety of the quotation, because spoken words could be less polished than thoughts. I know. I wanted to. Once. The confession was small, but it cost her more than accusation. Lucian's breath changed. At Lady Honoria's charity discussion. You listened to me for 20 seconds. I made the mistake of remembering. It was not a mistake. It became one. He looked down, accepting the blow. Then let tomorrow be the beginning of making it less so. He reached into his coat and took out the torn fragment at last, wrapped in fresh linen. Cressida had not seen him retrieve it from Lady Honoria's desk, but the open door meant nothing improper had occurred. Lady Honoria must have allowed it. He unfolded the linen carefully and set the torn silk beside the whole glove. The two pieces belonged to the same pair, yet they looked like two possible lives. One intact because it had been taken and used. One damaged because it had resisted. Lucian did not touch her hand. He bent his head and pressed his lips lightly to the torn edge of the glove, not as a lover's flourish, but like a man acknowledging an oath he had no right to demand. Then he straightened. The restraint of it made the room feel suddenly too quiet. Cressida could not speak at once. Lady Honoria's pen resumed in the next room, briskly enough to save them both from too much silence. Tomorrow, Cressida said at last, I will not ask you to fight for me. I will ask you to hear me where all may hear. Then I will hear you. And when I speak, you will not make my words smaller by making them yours. No, and you will not ask me for an answer to anything beyond the truth. Something like pain crossed his face, but he bowed his head. No, the promise stood between them, difficult and clean. A footman appeared at the open door and handed Lady Honoria a final card. She read it, then looked into the drawing-room with a smile that contained no warmth at all. Lady Beatrice has confirmed again for tomorrow. How reassuring. She is confident enough to be careless. Cressida looked at the broken clasp tooth, the torn glove, the whole glove, and the rosewood box. Tomorrow, the room that had once fed on whispers would be given something harder to swallow. Lucian gathered nothing from the table. He left the evidence where she could see it. "Good night, Lady Cressida," he said. "Good night, Your Grace." At the doorway, he paused, not turning fully back. "Whatever they say tomorrow, they will not find you alone in it." Then he was gone, and the house settled around the coming storm. Cressida stood beside the table until the fire burned lower, looking at the torn silk that had survived being used against her. For the first time since the corridor at Alton House, she did not see only the damage. She saw the proof of resistance. By 3 o'clock the next afternoon, Lady Honoria Pell's drawing room contained every person who had mistaken Cressida Vale's silence for weakness. The charity committee had been arranged beneath the innocent banner of Widows' Relief, but no one in the room believed that embroidery, subscriptions, or baskets of linen had drawn so many sharp eyes to one set of chairs. Lady Fenton sat near the window with her daughter beside her. Mrs. Armitage occupied the sofa and whispered behind her fan until Lady Honoria looked at her once and made whispering seem vulgar. The Marchioness of Alton arrived dressed in dove grey, the colour of dignified sorrow, with Beatrice at her side in pale blue and no bracelet visible at either wrist. Mr. Ambrose Lyle came last, pretending reluctance with the eagerness of a man who hoped to watch a woman humbled and be credited for restraint afterward. Lucian Harbury entered shortly after them, and the room changed in the way rooms changed for dukes. Chairs seemed straighter. Voices lowered. Beatrice's eyes lifted with quick calculation, then fell. Cressida stood beside Lady Honoria's writing table, not sitting where pity might arrange her, not hiding behind the rosewood box placed before her. On the table lay the whole left glove, the torn fragment, the forged letter, Mr. Bell's sealed memorandum, Mr. Harcourt's ledger copy, and a folded note from Mr. Alden of Bond Street. Small things. Terrible things. Things no one would have noticed if she had remained useful. Lady Honoria rang a little silver bell, though everyone was already silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we shall begin with the matter everyone has been pretending not to come here for." A few faces coloured. The Marchioness gave a faint, injured smile. "Lady Honoria, surely this is unnecessary. I had hoped that private distress might remain private." "Then you should not have made it public at your supper table," Lady Honoria replied. "Westhaven, you asked to speak first." Lucian stepped forward. Cressida did not look at him. She kept her eyes upon the room because the room had been her judge before it had earned the right. "Before any evidence is read," Lucian said, "I owe Lady Cressida Vale a public apology." Beatrice's head lifted. Mr. Lyle shifted. Lucian's voice remained calm, but it carried to every corner. "2 nights ago, in Alton House, I spoke words that were careless, cruel in their effect, and unjust. I allowed a staged accusation to stand long enough for my silence to become part of it. I then spoke as though the woman being judged were less important than the scandal forming around her. I was wrong. The words did not tremble. That made them heavier. Lady Cressida did not earn my contempt. She did not earn anyone's. The fault was mine." The Marchioness's mouth tightened. "How noble, Your Grace. Yet an apology does not create innocence." "No," Lucian said. "That is why Lady Cressida will speak next." He stepped back. Not beside Cressida. Not in front of her. Back. The room had no choice but to look at her. Cressida placed one gloved hand on the table. "I was accused of writing a letter to His Grace in order to force a scandal. I denied it. My denial was treated as desperation because desperation was the role assigned to me before I entered the room." She lifted the forged letter. "This was said to be mine. The wax on it matches the wax found upon the torn piece of my glove, which was caught on the conservatory latch after Lady Beatrice followed me from the corridor." Beatrice gave a soft gasp. "Cressida, don't do this. I am not doing anything that was not first done to me." Cressida set the letter down and lifted the torn glove. "This fragment contains a blue-green thread and was torn in a way no woman could easily arrange while alone. Mr. Alden of Bond Street has provided a note stating that Lady Beatrice brought him a blue-green bracelet the next morning. The clasp had lost a small tooth. He repaired it before the supper at Alton House. Lady Honoria opened the jeweller's note and read the relevant lines aloud. The room listened differently now. Not kindly. Carefully. That was enough. Lucian placed the tiny broken clasp tooth on the table. The blue-green thread still clung to one edge. Miss Fenton leaned forward, pale. I saw the bracelet, she whispered. Lady Fenton touched her arm, but the girl continued. At Alton House. I said so yesterday. Beatrice's face whitened beneath its polish. A bracelet clasp proves nothing. I may have brushed against her by accident. Cressida has always been dramatic about small injuries. Then why deny following her? Cressida asked. Beatrice looked toward her mother. The Marchioness stepped in smoothly. Because the matter had already been inflamed by His Grace's unfortunate attention. My daughter feared being drawn into Cressida's confusion. My confusion has been very profitable, Cressida said. She opened the rosewood box and withdrew Mr. Bell's memorandum. The late Earl of Vale placed £10,000 and securities in trust as my marriage portion. The Marquis of Alton and Sir Edmund Faircombe were named trustees. Sir Edmund died 5 years ago. No proper accounting followed. Mr. Bell, my father's former solicitor, confirms the existence of the trust and the Marchioness's letters claiming I was comfortably maintained. The phrase passed through the room like a draft under a door. Lady Honoria read the memorandum with crisp precision. Mr. Harcourt then handed Lucian the ledger copy, and Lucian placed it before Lady Honoria without reading over Cressida. Mr. Harcourt has traced payments between Mr. Silas Venn and Alton obligations, Cressida continued. One entry refers to a sapphire clasp. Another concerns private debts. Mr. Venn has now left his rooms. This is outrageous, the Marchioness said. Her voice was still elegant, but the bass note had hardened. A dependent girl finds old papers and suddenly imagines herself robbed. Cressida looked at her. If my poverty made me easy to accuse, what does that make those who profited from it? No one answered. It was Lady Honoria who signalled toward the door. Mary entered with another maid beside her, both trembling but properly dressed. Cressida's heart tightened, but she did not interrupt. Mary curtsied. I saw Lady Beatrice follow Lady Cressida toward the conservatory passage, my lady. I heard Lady Cressida say, "Let me go." Then I saw the glove tear on the latch. Beatrice stood so abruptly that her chair struck the carpet behind her. She's a servant. Mamma dismissed her. No, Lady Honoria said. I placed her elsewhere before your household could punish truth for having ears. Mr. Lyle tried to laugh. Surely the word of a maid cannot overturn a lady's reputation. Lucian turned his head. It can overturn a lie told by a gentleman with too much appetite for spectacle. Mr. Lyle's laugh died at once. The Marchioness rose slowly. You have all decided your conclusion. I will not remain to be insulted in a room that pretends charity while conducting persecution. You may leave, Lady Honoria said. But the memorandum will be copied to the remaining trustees' representatives. Mr. Harcourt will request a formal accounting. The patronesses present will know why Lady Beatrice is withdrawing from the season. Beatrice's composure broke then, not into tears, but into anger. It was supposed to be simple. She was nobody. She was always nobody. The words were the final proof the room needed. Cressida felt them pass through her and failed to wound as deeply as they once would have. Lucian stepped forward only enough to be heard. No. She was a woman you counted on no one defending. There is a difference. The Marchioness took Beatrice's arm too tightly for dignity, then seemed to remember the room and loosened her grip. They left without curtsies. Mr. Lyle attempted to follow, but Lady Honoria stopped him with one look. You, sir, may remain long enough to understand that every household here will hear your part in this before dinner. He bowed badly and fled anyway. The room exhaled after the door closed. Mrs. Armitage began to apologize, but Cressida lifted a hand. Not yet. Please don't offer me sorrow while it is still convenient. Offer me accuracy when I am absent. Lady Fenton lowered her eyes. Miss Fenton looked at Cressida with open shame and something like respect. One by one, the women present gave their names to Lady Honoria as witnesses to what had been read. It was not applause. It was better. It was record. When the last card had been placed on the tray, Lucian bowed to Cressida before all of them. Now they have heard you. She looked at him across the table where the torn glove lay beside the whole one, damage and false innocence side by side. No, she said quietly. Now they have begun to listen. After the room emptied, Cressida stepped out onto the terrace alone. The afternoon air was cool and clean against her face. Behind her, through the open door, she heard Lucian stop at a respectful distance. He did not call her back. He did not ask for reward. He waited as if waiting were the first honest language he had learned. For the first time, Cressida did not feel alone in the silence. 3 weeks after the charity committee, Lady Cressida Vale learned that vindication did not arrive like thunder. It arrived in envelopes. It arrived in visiting cards from women who had suddenly discovered they had always doubted the Altons. It arrived in Mr. Harcourt's careful hand, informing her that the surviving trustees' representatives had agreed to a formal accounting of her marriage portion. It arrived in Lady Honoria Pell's breakfast room, where the Morning Post was sorted into 3 piles, useful, insulting, and amusing only after tea. The Marchioness of Alton had withdrawn from town under the pretence of a nervous complaint. Lady Beatrice had been sent to a northern cousin, where no committee of London ladies could admire her tears. Mr. Ambrose Lyle had discovered that gentlemen who enjoyed staging accusations became much less welcome at card tables once their usefulness had been exposed. No one called it punishment aloud. Society preferred softer words when its own hands were not clean. But doors had closed. Invitations had ceased. Names had been spoken with pauses where respect used to stand. Cressida did not dance on the ruin. She had lived too close to ruin to find it festive. Instead, she sat beside Lady Honoria's window and opened the envelopes that concerned her future with hands that no longer trembled. Lady Fenton has called again, Lady Honoria said, lifting a card between 2 fingers. This is her 3rd attempt to appear repentant without using the word wrong. Cressida smiled faintly. Her daughter wrote separately. Miss Fenton has more courage than her mother and worse handwriting. Both are hopeful signs. Cressida looked at the folded note from the younger woman, who had written only that she had corrected the story twice when others repeated it falsely. That mattered. Accuracy in absence had become a form of loyalty. On the table near Cressida's elbow lay the rosewood box, now repaired by a cabinetmaker and lined with new blue silk. Her mother's letters rested inside, along with Mr. Bell's memorandum and the first account of funds that had once been described as family generosity. She was not wealthy beyond measure. She was not restored to some fairy tale abundance. But she was no longer dependent upon a house that had fed her with one hand and hidden her bread with the other. That was freedom enough to change the shape of a room. At noon, Lucian Harbury came to call. He had called 3 times since the committee, always in daylight, always properly, always with Lady Honoria present or near enough to hear if she wished. He had not pressed. That restraint had done more to disturb Cressida's defenses than any declaration could have done. Men had told her what she needed. Lucian had begun asking what she chose. When he entered the breakfast room, Lady Honoria stood with alarming brightness. I have letters to write in the library. The door will remain open, and I shall be near enough to cough if anyone forgets civilization. Lucian bowed. Your confidence humbles me. It should. It is limited. She left them with the door open, which made the room both private and safe. Lucian remained standing until Cressida indicated the chair opposite her. Mr. Harcourt tells me the first funds will be released within the month, he said. Yes. And that you have refused to let him pursue damages beyond recovery of what was yours. For now. His eyes warmed slightly. For now is a phrase I have learned not to underestimate from you. Good. She looked at him across the small table. I do not want revenge to become the house I live in next. No, I want enough to decide who may enter my life and who may not. Then I hope to ask properly. The words changed the air. Not abruptly. Not like scandal. Like a candle being lit in a room that had waited for dusk. Cressida's hand stilled. Ask what? He did not smile at her attempt to make him say it plainly. He honored it. Whether you would consider becoming my wife. Not today, if today is too soon. Not because of what happened. Not because of my guilt. And not because a duchess's title would make society more comfortable with forgiving itself. He drew a breath, and for the first time she saw the vulnerability beneath the discipline. I ask because I love you. I love your courage, your precision, your refusal to be grateful for less than dignity. I love the way you hear people no one else hears. I love that you did not let my worst sentence become your final measure of yourself. Cressida looked toward the open door. Lady Honoria did not cough. You once wanted to repair what you had broken, she said. Yes. Is that still what this is? No, he leaned forward, only a little. I will regret what I said for the rest of my life. But regret is not a marriage. Admiration is not a marriage. Protection is not a marriage. If you marry me, I want it to be because you choose a partner, not a refuge. Her throat tightened. She had imagined proposals before, years ago, when she was younger and still believed being chosen would cure the loneliness of being unseen. This was not that dream. It was quieter. Stronger. It did not place her on a pedestal. It offered her a place beside someone who had learned how dangerous it was to stand above. I have conditions, she said. The relief that crossed his face was brief and beautiful because he did not mistake conditions for refusal. Name them. My portion remains settled for my independent use. Already arranged, if you accept. I will continue Lady Honoria's work for women whose families manage their dependents too comfortably. I hoped you would. You will never apologize for me when I can speak for myself. Never. She looked at him then, fully. And if I say yes, it will not be because I have forgotten. His voice lowered. I would not ask you to forget. That was when she knew. Not because the wound had vanished, but because it no longer stood alone between them. Then yes, she said. The word was small. The world it opened was not. Lucian closed his eyes for one breath, then bowed his head over her gloved hand only after she offered it. His lips touched the silk with reverence, and nothing in the gesture claimed her. It thanked her. From the library, Lady Honoria called, if that was a yes, Westhaven, do not look smug. It would be premature. Cressida laughed then, the sound surprising her by how easily it came. Lucian looked at her as if the laughter had been entrusted to him. Months later, when Cressida first arrived at Whitecliffe Park as the future Duchess of Westhaven, the household lined the hall not with curiosity, but with composed respect. Lucian had told them the truth before she came. Not a polished version. Not a heroic version. The truth, including his own failure. That mattered more than garlands, though there were flowers too, gathered from the early summer borders and arranged without extravagance. Mary was there as well, now placed in service under Lady Honoria's recommendation, her cap ribbon tied neatly and her eyes bright with contained pride. Cressida greeted the housekeeper, the steward, the footman, and the maids by name when she could, and asked for the names she did not know. The servants noticed. Servants always noticed the difference between courtesy performed and courtesy meant. In Lucian's study, he showed her a small glass case on the mantel. Inside lay the torn glove, mended not invisibly, but with a fine line of silver thread that followed the tear like moonlight on a scar. Beside it rested a folded note in his hand. Not because it was broken. Because it told the truth. Cressida stood before it for a long time. The glove no longer looked pitiful. It looked brave. I can have it put away, Lucian said quietly. If it pains you. No, she touched the glass with one finger. Let it stay. He stood beside her, not too close until she leaned toward him. Then it stays. People will ask about it. Then we shall tell them it belonged to the woman who taught this house the difference between silence and honor. She turned to him, and this time, when he took her hand, it was bare. No glove, no torn silk, no hidden wound. Only her hand in his, freely given. Outside the study windows, the lawns of Whitecliffe Park rolled green beneath a wide English sky, and the house that had once waited for a duchess received not a rescued woman, but a woman who had chosen her own threshold. Cressida stepped across it with Lucian beside her, carrying her mother's letters, her restored name, and the quiet certainty that a life once torn could be mended without pretending the tear had never been there.